right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Bruce Warner. I'm the president of the TriMet Board of Directors, and I want to welcome you all to Portland Community Media, and that's our host for this morning. And we are very excited to be out in the community here in Northeast Portland. We do this on a regular basis as part of our effort to ensure that we stay connected to the communities we serve, and from time to time we want to hold our meetings in the communities we serve around the Tri-County metropolitan area. We are really happy to be here as we work to engage our communities more, and I would like to, for the folks that maybe are new from this area and are coming to the meeting, I'd like to have my fellow board members introduce themselves. So if I could, how about starting with you?
Good morning. Lori Bauman, District 4.
Good morning, Travis Stovall, District 6. That's the east side of the Portland metropolitan area.
Dr. Bethel?
Good morning, Dr. T. Allen Bethel, District 5, Northeast Portland.
Good. And again, I'm Bruce Warner. I'm representing the Beaverton, Hillsborough, the west side of the urban area. So again, thank you for introducing yourself. What we'd like to do first is let you know how things are going to move forward this morning. We'll begin with some remarks from the head of the Portland Community Media Organization. As soon as she finishes, we'll open the public forum for people to give testimony. And if the forum ends earlier than 45 minutes that we've allotted for this, we'll move directly into our board meeting with reports from our board members and our general manager, and then on to the business portion of the meeting. So let's get started. I would like to first thank our partner, Portland Community Media, for hosting us at their headquarters. And you may not know this, but Portland Community Media is the one behind our monthly web broadcasts. They stream our board meetings live to the community, and they're also available on our website after the initial time. So I want to again introduce B. Coulter, the Deputy Director, and not only thank her but her staff for covering our meetings and getting that information and videos out, but invite her to tell us a little bit about your organization. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm B. Coulter. I'm Director of Operations, Deputy Director at PCM. And we wanted to welcome all of you to our facility. Thank you for being here this morning. We're really happy to have you in the facility today. PCM has been a member of the community for going on 35 years. We provide public, educational, and government community media services to the city of Portland and the metropolitan area. Basically, that means that we teach and provide access to any member of the public who wants to come in and has an idea for a program, wants to connect with their neighbors through television and online streaming. We teach them how to do that. We also provide government services. So we produce the gavel-to-gavel coverage of the city council meetings and meetings like this one, which help to connect viewers to what's going on in the city. Many viewers can't make the meeting times during the day because they're at work, and so we replay those meetings throughout the evenings and weekends and make government more accessible to the community. So that's kind of a brief snapshot of what we do. Again, welcome to PCM, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Indeed, pleasure to be here. I've never been here before, so I know exactly where you are. All right. With that, let's open the public forum. We'll hold the public forum for a maximum of 45 minutes. I think there's like 12 people who've signed up here this morning. I have agreed to allow Opal and Bus Riders United 10 minutes to present their information that they did send us earlier, and I want everybody in the audience to understand that we did receive your life presentation, and I know I've looked at it a couple times, and I know the board members also have taken a look at that. So I'd like to ask whoever, when I get to the Bus Riders Unite and Opal, whoever really wants to make that presentation, I'd like to have them come up first, and then if there's others that want to follow, I think that's great, but I don't want to see, again, a whole lot more of duplication of the testimony of the same thing. So if you're just there to support what they presented, please just say so, and we'll move on and be able to move through this in a timely manner. So let's start with, first off, who is going to make the presentation on the life this morning? Why don't we have you come up front first and do that? And maybe you can introduce yourselves so I know who you are and the audience knows who you are.
Hi, I'll introduce myself first. I am Avon Moore. I am a member of Bus Riders Unite, have been for 4 years now, and I worked on this report with the rest of the Research and Advisory Committee for BRU.
Great.
Aaron Golub, also a member of BRU and bus rider in Southeast.
Orlando Lopez, Opal Environmental Justice Organizer.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, I'll start. Oops, sorry. All right, good morning, bus TriMet board members. Several months ago, our Bus Riders Unite Research and Advisory Committee took on an ambitious project. We wanted to research the feasibility of a low-income fare for transit riders, and that's what we're here to present to you today. The Low-Income Fare Equity, LIFE report was delivered to the TriMet office on August 31st, and as Bruce noted, I know at least some of you have read the report. Why do we need this? God, we have to do the whole click thing. There we go.
There we go.
We know that transportation is the second largest household expense in the U.S. I think everyone at TriMet knows that. And that also it's a necessity for participation in society. It's a lifeline for a lot of people, especially people who are low income. We know that in January of 2014, the median rent in Portland was $1,000,457. Fast forward to January 2015, it increased by 7.3%. Then in January of this year, it increased another 13.23% to $1,771. And you can only assume what will happen next year. The rent and other aspects of cost of living in Portland are skyrocketing, and so the cost of transit is getting more problematic, not less, as time goes by.
So we looked at a number of cities, but the ones we've really focused on was both San Francisco and Seattle. In San Francisco, they have the Lifeline Pass, which came into effect in 2005. Residents are eligible if income is at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. Monthly pass costs half the price of the standard adult pass. Roughly 15% of ridership, which is about 20,000 customers per month, use the Lifeline. Seattle King County Metro has a program called the Orca Lift, which came into effect this year, and also uses the 200% of the federal poverty level. Over 33,000 use Lyft users out of the estimated 496 eligible King County residents, which is like 6.6%, are using it. So even with the 200% of the federal poverty level as a threshold, you can see that the penetration rate is very low, and this is actually very common among a lot of the other transit agencies as well. And although we researched the cost of also the $50 pass, and we've included it in the report, and you can go ahead and read it there. Today we're focusing on a $28 pass, which is the equivalent of the Honored Citizen Pass. As you can see in the table above, we considered a number of different scenarios. We looked at 3 thresholds for eligibility ranging from 150% to 185 and 200% of the federal poverty level. On top of that, we evaluated the impact of 2 different adoption rates among all eligible riders, a low adoption scenario of 10% and a high adoption scenario of 20%.
Go ahead. The idea being there that we know only a small fraction of eligible riders are actually going to start using this. We've seen that in other cities. So those were our that's our estimate range. And that does affect the cost estimate pretty significantly. When you look at the methods we used, Our main sources of cost were potential fare revenue losses and potential increases in ridership for people for whom the reduced fare makes it possible to ride. We know that there's going to be an administrative cost of some kind. We expect it to be pretty low. As we've seen in both Seattle and San Francisco, the transit agencies have partnered up with existing service agencies that are run by local governments and nonprofit organizations. So the offices that would do sort of, the income verification, signing people up, aren't necessarily going to be all run by TriMet. Yeah. And then, of course, the data sources, like what information did we use to do this? The first bit of information that we used was the 2012 TriMet Onboard Rider Survey that was conducted in fall of 2012. That was our primary data source. We do know that there's a more recent rider survey that was conducted this year. Recently. But TriMet has not provided us with that information. We requested it. We know that 49s, the consulting firm that was hired by TriMet to study separately a low-income fare, wasn't given full access to the most recent survey. This is the information that we have to work with. The other information that we used to figure out the cost impact of this was income data on the population within the service district.
And in the report, we also included other ways of which TriMet can actually meet the cost. So this board has the ability to impose a new corporate or personal income tax, increase advertising revenue, charge premium fares for West. One of the things, according to TriMet's own performance and efficiency data, West costs $16.11 per passenger to operate, as opposed to $3.18 for bus and $2.51 for Max. Also, charging for park and ride facilities. Many public transit agencies across the nation actually charge for parking services, and some of the examples that we've seen are Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Denver, and Boston. In Boston, they actually collect $17.3 million of revenue as compared to $0 from TriMet. Our demands, well, what we want is to have this program be integrated with the rollout of the electronic fare system that is coming soon. Also, that the upper income limit should be used at 200% of the federal poverty line, which is roughly 65% of area median income. Reduced cost fare should match the honor citizen fare of $28 per month. Eligibility should be verified through W-2s, tax returns, pay stubs, or Oregon Trail card. The card should be valid for at least 2 years, and the Life Pass should supplement, not replace, the existing subsidized tickets provided by Portland Area Social Services, or the Access Transit program.
That's our proposal for you. Do you have questions for us?
Well, first off, nicely done to get your presentation down to 10 minutes. I appreciate that. And again, your detailed information was helpful. And it's clear you folks have spent a lot of time on it. Does the board have any comments or questions of the folks here testified? We're going to hear more from staff a bit about where we are in the process. And obviously this information is going to be taken into consideration as we move forward. You've made some demands on various issues that I think are areas where we need to spend some time exploring the options, make sure we're in agreement on the problem, make sure we understand all of the solutions there. And then I think we need to figure out how we, with our partners, are actually going to make this work as you described. So I think you've got some good principles in your presentation.
As President Warner just referenced, thank you for your presentation. Excellent information. Greatly appreciate the time and effort you've put into this. A quick question in regards to kind of that last slide. If you just go back to the last slide, if you have the capability of doing that. So the last bullet point, the Life Pass should supplement, not replace, the existing subsidized tickets provided by Portland area social service agencies. So we put that into place roughly about, I think it was about 5 years ago now, in regards to the subsidized tickets or passes. Now we've got all this information that you have in your request that you're asking. What can you contrast for me, I guess the rest of the board, I guess I'm done.
Yeah.
Contrast with the rest of the board, the kind of the difference between what you see as far as the subsidized ticket and operations as opposed to what you're asking for now.
Sure. So the difference between the subsidized ticket and this is that with a subsidized, you have to be going through a separate agency, and the community organizations that provide these, it's program specific. So you're going through two different. You're reaching two different populations, basically. You've got people who are already participating and receiving services from an agency, right? And then you give them, subsidized tickets in order so they can get to your programs. With this, it would be reaching people who may or may not be participating already in some kind of service, but do have trouble affording the fare. It's especially important, I think we mentioned this in the report, during the transition period from not having a reduced fare to having wider knowledge of the reduced fare, because people already know how they can get their discounted tickets at this point, or their free tickets. So there's also we account for a reduced fare in this plan, but obviously there's no free tickets in this plan. And we know that there are going to be people who still depend on getting, free tickets in order to access services. So we don't want to, cut that off. Does anyone have anything to add?
So one more quick follow-up
Please,
question.
no.
Thank you very much, Avon. So as I listen to that response, I'm hearing it's more of an expansion and an augmentation of the current subsidized tickets that's in place, something that's more formal, something that's operationally different. But essentially, it's really this expansion of what we're currently doing from a subsidized ticket perspective. But operationally, it's there's some things that can be done differently, which include getting the message out differently, engaging with different organizations than what we're doing right now, expanding that. But I think it's, from what I'm hearing, it's really this conceptually, it's an expansion of what we're currently doing, both operationally, exposure, and all of those things.
I think we see it as an expansion of the Honored Citizen program, and I would look to that example a little bit more closely than an expansion of this program. These are, like Avon said, these are tickets for people accessing specific programs.
Mm-hmm.
And the Honored Citizen is available to anyone. And in this case, they would need to obviously qualify like an Honored Citizen. So I would look to that operationally as a better analog.
And then that's the perfect answer. You're right. And that's what I was trying to reference. We already have essentially, through the subsidized program, a low-income fare. But operationally, it would need to look more like, to kind of answer what your request is, it would need to operationally look more like the Honor Citizen fare and the way it's accessed, the way it's distributed, as opposed to the subsidized tickets.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. That's what I was wondering.
Is that your last question?
That's my last question.
Okay. Director Bauman, did you have any questions or
I
comments?
don't have any questions. Thank you for a helpful report.
Dr. Bethel?
No questions at this time, but do thank you for the presentation, the amount of time in which you did it in, and the way in which you conducted it this morning. I appreciate that very much.
It is appreciated. Thank you both. Thank you, all three of you, not both. All right. Well, let's move on then. As I said, if you're here to support the LIFE proposal that you just heard about, please signify that. You don't have to give us any other information unless you're at the point where you that you want to expand on some of the particular information that was brought there. So with that, I'd like to call you up two at a time. Keith Schultz and Sean Fleek. Keith, you've got your raincoat on, I see. You're about a day early, right?
Yeah. Maybe a day late. Yeah. Okay. Good morning. As you know, I'm Keith Schultz from Gresham, and I'm representing Opal and Bus Riders Unite. I still have my transparency raincoat to remind you of open discussions and my disdain of backroom deals. As you know, Opal and BRU have been researching a low-income fare for low-income transit riders who depend on TriMet. We see transit as a human right that allows people to access jobs, education, green spaces, and health services, among other things. People need access to these resources to live a healthy, independent lifestyle. As a disabled person with a Medicare card, I can use the current Honored Citizen fare. I also know firsthand how it is to live with little to no income, and believe me, it's tough. Even with access to an Honored Citizen pass, there have been times that I have been unable to pay for an Honored Citizen pass. In the Portland area, there are many low-income people who don't qualify for the Honored Citizen status, and as a result, they have to pay $100 a month for a monthly pass, which is way too much. Having a low-income fare with a threshold of 200% of the federal poverty level would be an immense help for those who struggle to live with skyrocketing rents. You cannot really believe that 150% of the federal poverty level is an adequate definition for low-income folks. It's time that TriMet raises their threshold to 200%. We can't wait another 3 years.
Thank you, Keith. Please.
Nyaku Sitne Sean Fleek na Isatina Inono Ayanainu. My name is Sean Fleek. I'm a descendant of the Northern Arapaho tribe, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. Out of respect for your time, I just want to say that I am in full support of the BRU Life Report, and particularly think that the board should examine the 200% of the federal poverty level threshold as the only real adequate choice for what a low-income person is in Portland.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Good.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comments and the recommendation. The next two I have are Jonathan Gates and Noel Mickleberry, if I've got it correctly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Jonathan Gates. I work for the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. We're comprised of 48 community-based programs throughout the state, including 14 within the TriMet service area that provide shelter, counseling, and other advocacy services to survivors of domestic abuse and sexual violence. I've come before you today to offer testimony in strong support of Opal's proposal for a robust reduced fare program for low-income riders. We support this proposal because survivors of abuse are frequently also low-income and transit-dependent. The people we serve would greatly benefit from this proposal if TriMet implements it with eligibility criteria set at 200% of the federal poverty line. Now, the physical and emotional harms of experiencing abuse are pretty well understood by the general public. However, I'd like to call your attention to another kind of abuse that is not very often talked about in the general public discourse, and that's financial abuse. Now, regardless of prior socioeconomic status, many survivors of abuse are only able to get away with, literally, the clothes on their backs. That's not hyperbole, especially if a survivor is already experiencing homelessness, doesn't have a robust network of social support, or the abuser is using financial means to sabotage, control, and isolate them. Financial abuse can manifest in a variety of ways, including disallowing the victim from working, sabotaging work or employment opportunities, hiding bank accounts and other assets, running up large amounts of debt in the victim's name, and refusing to pay or evading child support. As a result, the challenges of escaping these forms of financial abuse are extremely daunting. Ruined credit, spotty work histories, and legal issues feed very real fears of homelessness. So even for those who manage to escape, recovering from these effects of financial abuse can take years. And that's the main reason why we support this measure so thoroughly, especially because most of our coalition's member programs that are in the Portland metro area are already participating in the Access Transit program. However, the scope of this program is woefully narrow, especially considering that the recovery time for survivors experiencing abuse of this type can take months to years. and they may not be necessarily accessing services throughout that entire time, but they're still struggling to reestablish their credit, to get a job, to maintain childcare, to basically put their lives back together from scratch. So a reduced fare program for low-income riders would provide a vital bridge between their accessing services in immediate crisis and getting access transit fares and being able to have a self-determined life and be able to sustain themselves and their families. Thank you.
No, thank you. Noel?
Hi. My name is Noelle Mickleberry. I'm the Executive Director of Oregon Walks. We are the state's pedestrian advocacy organization dedicated to making walking safe, convenient, and attractive for everyone. So everyone is a pedestrian at some point during the day, and we work to ensure that every Oregon resident, regardless of income, age, ability, or geography, can interact, live, and thrive in their community by walking. We believe that transit is a critical connection for people who walk, particularly those who have been pushed out of the central city neighborhoods of Portland and who have fewer options for transportation to work, school, and services. Transit is a lifeline for many Portlanders, and if it too becomes inaccessible, we are quite literally creating barriers to a livable community rather than removing them. For those who are transit dependent, who use walking and transit as their sole transportation options, we have to create solutions. And we're proud to support Opal and the Bus Riders Unite report that was delivered to you today. We believe that the Low Income Fare Equity Report highlights the critical components of a reasonable, fair, affordable, and necessary solution that will enable our most vulnerable residents who are already relying on transit to continue utilizing this critical public resource. We just want to highlight the important note of using the 200% below, above the federal poverty line, as well as the support for the revenue description around charging for parking. Free parking encourages auto use, creates air quality issues, safety concerns. So that seems like a very reasonable way to find additional revenue that could support this program. So I won't go into too much more. I have written comments, but just want to show support for the plan.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Comments or questions by the board of these?
Do we have you submitted copies of your testimony?
I
you?
haven't had access to a printer, but I would gladly submit
Oh,
that, absolutely.
Electronically, we can get it. And you
Yep, got it right here.
Yep,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Thank you, by the way, thank you for your advocacy for alternative modes of transportation. And Johnston, thank you for what you and your organization does. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Very much appreciated.
All right, the next one we have is Andrea Limons and Nicole Phillip. I think that's Phillip. You're going to tell me if I'm reading that properly. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea Lemoynes. I'm coalition organizer for Portland Jobs with Justice, and I'm here to support the Bus Riders Unite plan and also Opal. So Portland Jobs with Justice is a coalition of over 100 different nonprofits, unions, faith and labor organizations, yes, ATU, fighting for racial, gender, and economic rights for low-wage workers in our city. So I am here because Portland Jobs with Justice supports Opal's demands, and especially the update to Title VI that will raise the federal poverty line from 150% to 200%. This increase will help low-income folks. As we know, there are so many low-income workers in this city and struggling with rent increases, trying to get to work, to school, to the doctor, etc. This will create a way to provide better access to being a part of their communities. I was a TriMet rider for 3 years. I live in Lentz, out and farther out east, and it's very difficult. It was very difficult on low wages trying to get back and forth to work in inner southeast, especially as you know, when you get on TriMet going farther out, there are like no sidewalks. You're standing in a mud puddle, waiting for the bus to just drive by and spell you with mud. That's pretty much how difficult it is, and especially for low-income folks of color who have been pushed out of this city. So my neighborhood is mostly people of color, and I see the struggles firsthand, have experienced it firsthand, of trying to get back and forth to a low-wage job on TriMet. So in conclusion, Opal is a leader in fighting for the rights of people of color in the city, and Portland Jobs with Justice hopes that TriMet will work with Opal to support their list of demands in order to build a more equitable city for all of us to live in. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
Nicole.
morning. Hi, I'm Nicole Phillips. I'm a member of BRU Steering Committee and their representative on TriMet's Transit Equity Advisory Committee. And I'm trying to cut this down, sorry. Okay. So, I'm a transit dependent rider. My bus pass is exceptionally important to me. I make sure I have it. It's one of the first, sometimes I buy that even before I pay my rent.
Mm-hmm.
It's the linchpin. It's how I keep my life together. I had to show it twice to get here today. When we as transit dependent riders ask that TriMet create a low income fare, and we want that based on that federal standard of 200% of the poverty level, we're not asking for a handout. The metro region is experiencing skyrocketing housing prices and just unprecedented displacement. While more people are employed, fewer people are earning a living wage. We're asking that you level the playing field by providing an affordable fare option. With a low-income fare, TriMet can help to keep the doors of opportunity open. We ask that you move forward with the low-income fare, allowing transit-dependent riders to support ourselves and our families and fully participate as vital, vibrant members of our community.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right.
Yeah, both of you, thank you very much for coming. So I have Shannon Cogan and Bruce Rebecca. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Shannon Cogan, and I'm here as a representative of Sisters of the Road. For those not familiar with Sisters, we have been at Northwest 6th and Davis since 1979, and we serve low-cost, nourishing meals in a dignified atmosphere while working with our community of customers to organize to end homelessness and poverty. We at Sisters wholeheartedly and strongly support the Life Report. I'm going to erase a bunch of my comments here. We want to especially endorse the pass for those at or below 200% of the federal poverty line. We know the federal poverty line is not the Portland poverty line, and it is only getting more expensive to live here. In Sisters Cafe, we see more and more people coming in who have jobs and are also trying to pay off student debt, provide for their children or others they are caregivers for, or pay off medical bills and keep themselves off the streets. The 200% standard would be hugely impactful for those people. Greater access to public transportation will have a real and immediate impact. In the spring of 2016, OHSU nursing students collaborated with us on a community project, and they surveyed about 75 people in the cafe. And those are people who are living outside as well as people living on minimum wage jobs, trying to keep their heads above water. And we're not a public place, so some of those people surveyed are not necessarily going through other service agencies in the area. What the nurses found was not news to many of our customers. Above housing, above food, above laundry and hygiene facilities, above all, people wanted greater access to TriMet passes. And having the low income pass as a part of honored citizens would be just huge for people. And I just want to leave you with a quote from one of our community members who said, "You can't imagine what it's like to be homeless without actually being it. But if I were to describe it, imagine standing outside with no money, no credit cards, no phone, no one to call, nowhere to go, completely alone. Just to find somewhere to sleep, eat, and go to the bathroom is a full-time job." That's the end of the quote. And so at Sisters, we say when surviving is a full-time job, we as a city should be doing everything we can to make that job as easy and as dignified as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello. My name is Catherine Brewis, and I'm here on behalf of the campaign of administrator who is running for Multnomah County District 4. And that encompasses basically the geographic area of East County. And as I'm sure the board members here have a pretty good grasp and understanding about gentrification and how that has impacted low-income individuals and people of color and LGBTQ individuals as well. And I'm here to present and inform the board that Amanda supports the BRU Life report as well as the measures that are presented by OPA. And she has also committed in the last week to riding the bus every single day and not being vehicle dependent whatsoever. And part of that has been her commitment to connect with the community to show that she understands their needs and the impact that transportation has potentially. And so I would like to just also say she has no necessary opinion on the financial part. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before you leave questions, just a moment. Rebecca, just a minute. I don't know whether there's a question for you. But
Shannon,
oh, Shannon, okay.
is Elise still there?
Elise is actually back working with the Democratic Party of Oregon. Yeah.
Anyway, because we were going to do something together on some remodeling down there. So
Okay.
anyway,
We'll
I'll
get
find
you
her.
connected. Yeah.
I also forgot to add as well, I am transit dependent as well, almost 95% of the time in the community, and I'm a very active community and political organizer with a lot of different involvement. Transportation is super important to me, especially based on low income status as well.
Great,
Thank you.
all right. Didn't you say how long Sisters of the Road has been in operation? I missed that.
Since 1979, so we're coming up on 37 years.
Yeah, so thanks again for what you do there. It's
Thank
very
you.
valuable, yes. All right, next I have Shirley Block and Hu Yong, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, with Opal Environmental Justice. You'll tell me how to pronounce your name here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. President Block, good morning.
Good morning, President Warner and members of the board. ATU members are here today in solidarity with the community partners demanding justice and accountability from this agency. While the union has a growing list of its own issues with TriMet, it is important that TriMet begin to understand that bus drivers and other frontline employees share many of the same struggles as our riders, and we will join together to solve these struggles. The root cause of the problem that TriMet workers face is the same problem that TriMet riders face. TriMet management simply doesn't listen to anyone outside its upper management echo chambers or narrowly advise a high-paid consultant who parachute down in front of them. Workers know now that they're not being listened to, they are feeling distrust, and the ridership is feeling the same. What I want to ask of you guys to please listen to these members because we're standing strong with them, asking for this low, much needed pass for these people. They rely heavily on getting back and forth to work with these passes, to the doctors, to the hospitals. Everything relies on these. And I'm asking you, Neil, to please partner and help these folks out because I know our hearts at ATU stand 100% with these guys. If you can help them out, we would greatly appreciate it. Travis, I'm glad to see that you were the one who stepped up to the plate first to ask questions when they first came into this room. Because I know for a fact that they're not looking for a handout. All they want to do is support for the community. Our operators feel the same way that these folks do. When they get onto a bus and don't have the correct fare, there's conflicts, there's tension in that little bus. And we don't need that. The operators are getting assaulted because of fare issues, and I'm not saying that all assaults are geared to fare, but I am saying a percentage of it happens that way. And President Warner, you can help by trying to support these people 100%. That's all I'm here to ask today is for support. And plus, I got a letter for Randy, but that's another story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a quick comment. President Block, thank you. Greatly appreciate you being here. Greatly appreciate showing support of this effort. I do want to say you referenced in your comments that this is an agency that doesn't listen to its riders. You know, and I'm going to push back on that just a little bit. You know, it was BRU and Opal that brought to us the original concept of something that's going to help out low-income riders. It was their effort that pushed forward the opportunity we have today to allow the agencies to have the reduced fares and the subsidized fares. So it was BRU and Opal that brought that forward. It was BRU and Opal and our ridership that brought forward the idea of an extended transfer. And we listened to them. We worked with them collaboratively. They asked for a 3-hour, and the board felt like 2.5 hours was something that we could agree on. And so to say we don't listen, I think, is something that doesn't really reflect what we're trying to do as an agency. I mean, we're all working towards the same outcome and the same goals. And so I'm not saying that there aren't improvements, because certainly there are things that we need to improve on collaboratively with the ATU, collaboratively with our stakeholders and our riders. I completely will agree to that. There's always improvements for any organization. But I do feel like over the last 4 years, as a board and as an agency, we've worked hard to start to have a more collaborative approach to the challenges that face us, and we'll look at this request the same exact way we did the two previous requests that we worked very closely with Opal and BRU on. And so, my only thing here is to say that we don't absolutely listen, I don't think is 100% correct in its presentation. But I agree with you. We can always be pushing for additional improvement in how we communicate and how we collaborate. That is certainly on the table.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and great. And I know you. I hear you, and I feel you.
And we hear you. So thank you.
Good morning, folks. First and foremost, this is beautiful to have drivers and riders together in unity. This is great. I'm Hui Ong, Executive Director of Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. Opal has a track record of holding TriMet accountable to low-income people and people of color. We filed a successful Title VI civil rights complaint with our partners at Center for Intercultural Organizing, now Unite Oregon, to stop service cuts that impacted our communities. This demonstrates TriMet has a history of excluding low-income people and people of color from consideration when changing policy. You heard from a broad range of impacted people today as to the need in this community. We have witnessed the failed rollout of the electronic fare system policies, and we have pushed to make it better for our communities. But our most important demand has yet to be implemented. There's a clear need for a low-income fare at TriMet that meets the same criteria as other cities on the West Coast. Low-income riders are being pinched on housing, a rising cost of living, and stagnant wages. I think the broad range of voices today reflect that. We need relief, and transportation is a huge expense for our communities. In our report, we have shown you how to get it done without cutting services, raising standard fares, or hurting your employees. We need a more inclusive, equitable definition of low income, a threshold of 200% of the federal poverty line. This is the issue of equity for our most impacted people. We want the 200% threshold not just for the low-income fare, but for the agency's definition of low income for their Title VI update, which you all have an opportunity to take on. This will ensure you consider more vulnerable communities when you make new policies. It will keep TriMet accountable to their image as a progressive thought leader in transportation policy, as it will ensure that Portland families can access a transit system we often feel is leaving us behind. We ask that you follow the leadership of our members, your riders, and work with us on this. Invite key community stakeholders to participate in your low-income fare advisory committee, which currently has no community representation. Help us align TriMet's policy with the needs of riders. In your process moving forward, you will need to take into account the findings of our report. We are here to help you succeed at making Portland a better place to live. We are here to hold you accountable if you fail to listen to the people who most depend upon TriMet services to get to the places where we live, work, learn, play, and pray. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Any other final comments? You were the last two. Is there any other final comments or questions from the board on this? I want to thank you, and I want to assure you that your information and the report and your recommendations will definitely be taken into consideration. I would encourage you to stick around and listen to our update on the low-income fare program research
Absolutely.
that we've done and kind of how we see moving forward. But I think your desires and ours are very closely aligned.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, as I said, that concludes the public forum this morning. And I'm going to move right into the regular business meeting. So with that, I'm going to call the regular meeting of the TriMet Board of Directors for September 26th. Is that 26th? 28th, excuse me, 2016 to order. With that, the first items on the agenda are board reports. The first report is from the board on the Committee on Accessible Transportation, or CAT as we call that. Director Bauman, are you prepared to give us a report this morning? All right.
Yes, thank you. Happy to do so. The CAT met last week, September 21st, and here are the highlights of that meeting. There was an update from Jennifer Kuzer regarding the Powell Division Transit and Development Project. She described an update on the project and upcoming steering committee meetings. The members of the CAT again expressed concern about changes in the location of stops on Division, the reduction in the number of stops, their concern. They wanted me to let the board know that they have a concern about expanding the distance that individuals may have to walk to get to stops. The second item was a report and an overview by Darren Morris on the proposed purchase of DMU vehicles for WES. There were questions about the accessibility of those vehicles that I think were satisfactorily addressed. And finally, there was a Lyft operations report by Margot Moore and Laura DeHaan on Lyft performance for the months of July and August, and Broadway Cab staff was present to answer questions about their provision of Lyft service. And that's the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Director Bauman? Thank you very much for the report. Dr. Bethel, you have a report from the Transit Equity Advisory Committee.
Good morning, board members again, and to those of you in the audience. Good to have you here. Three things that the TAC focused on in its last monthly meeting, work session on developing recommendations to inform TriMet's Fare Enforcement Work Group. Also, the second thing was to partner, discussions to partner with Metro on a regional task force for researching a low-income fare program. I think you will see that even through TIAC and other parts of TriMet, we're working to try to develop something that will work for a low-income fare. And finally, an update on TriMet's diversity and transit equity staff's work on building out of a larger cross-agency equity team for TriMet. There will be some more information, I think, later around Title VI. And my understanding from a post I received on yesterday, that federal government just decided they're going to change the manual. And they've already released one little small section with more to come. It's going to be interesting as we keep one and the other together. But I am sure and still firmly believe that TriMet is committed to keeping up with the Title VI and making sure it's enforced and to the best of our community and riders. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Any questions by the board? No. Thank you, Dr. Bethel.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Craig Prosser, board member who's not here today, is ill. So I won't have a report on the Metro Policy Advisory Committee unless, Mr. General Manager, you have anything to add, because I don't know whether you attended that or not.
Well, I wouldn't note that there was a joint work session between the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation Impact and a number of other community groups focused on the upcoming update of the Regional Transportation Plan at Metro. So that was the prime activity over the last month for the impact report. And I would just say that it was a very important conversation in terms of beginning to move forward with sort of a more invigorated regional transportation program overall. And leave it at that unless there are questions.
That's good. I'm sure Craig can give us a more complete update, because it sounds like this is going to be an ongoing discussion for quite a while.
Yes, and actually we do plan a much more thorough update about the transit components of that effort to the board in upcoming months.
Good. Thank you. A report by good Craig Prosser, not here. I'd maybe ask the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee or vice chair to give us an update from the meeting this morning.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We actually hold our Finance and Audit Committee meetings right before our board meetings, and so we've got stuff that's fresh hot off the press, as we would say. A couple of key items that we actually reviewed. Two of these items we'll be covering during the board meeting today, which are the bond issues. We had a highlight on the two bond issues we're going to be discussing, and then we also reviewed the audit results, and so we did a preliminary review of those audit results, which we'll receive this morning also here in just a few moments, which I'll cut to the chase and say they're stellar. So it's going to be fun to hear those results at this point in time. A couple of items that I do want to reference from the bigger picture. Capital. We've got, as an organization, we have a lot of capital, a lot of rolling stock, a lot of fixed assets, a lot of buildings that exist within our network and in our infrastructure. And as we look at that, there are various things that need to happen with that capital. And there's usually, when you talk capital, there's a significant amount of expense that goes along with it, buildings and buses and all of those things. Over time, we've got to do things like replacement. With buses, we've got to replace those over time. Historically, our average age of our buses were in the double digits. Today, I believe they're below 9 years. So when I say double digits, that'd be 12 to 15 years of the average age of our buses. And we've worked hard over the last few years to bring that down. I believe now we're under 9, even close to 8. So those are good numbers in regards to reliability, which we've heard from our stakeholders. Reliability and on-time performance are really critical things, because if you're planning on something, you want to make sure that it works and the timing works out exactly how you're planning it. And so we spent a significant amount of time this morning reviewing what the program looks like over the next few years in regards to those capital expenditures, and ensuring that we've got the financial capacity to continue making sure that our systems operate in a way that's going to meet the needs of our stakeholders, our riders, our operators, and everybody else that touches our system. So some of that information, is in regards to the bond issues that we're talking about, but it also ties in to what we call our strategic financial plan, which many of you have heard us talk about, and some of you are engaged in helping us develop. So that was a key component that we talked about this morning at that. And again, for the board, we'll be seeing some of those numbers and some of that information coming forth as we look at maintaining the components of the strategic financial plan as we've laid out over the next 5-10 years, and setting up future stakeholders and riders and utilizers of our system to be able to have a system that works well. Lastly, we touched base on the OPEB and some of the OPEB liabilities. Those are other post-employment benefits. So I know, actually, I said OPEB, and I even said that in what it all means. But I know sometimes it can be confusing. So these are essentially benefits that are owed to the folks, the great folks that have worked with our organization over time. So that's something that we constantly and consistently review to ensure that we've got some good visibility on how that's going to impact us financially. So for the board's benefit, we walked through some of the potential numbers of that. We watched how the impacts of some of those items are going to affect us over the next few years, and some of the GASB components that are going to be coming out next year, and making sure that we're well within the components of those things and how it impacts our bond ratings and things of that sort. The picture is still looking pretty good in regards to that, but we've got some long-term plans of how we address these OPEB liabilities. We're going to continue to revisit those plans to ensure that we're on track to make sure that that is something that we can continue to take care of and take care of that commitment. So that's pretty much the full perspective of what we talked about this morning. And again, we've got a couple of items which we'll be talking about more in depth during the board meeting, so you'll get some insights on the bond issues and the audit results. Are there any questions I can answer? We stepped through that pretty quickly, but all right.
I guess I just want to add too, and thanks to Doug Kelsey and all the other managers and directors who worked on the capital improvements, not only the needs, but really how our cash flow is going to be working over the next 5 years or so to make sure that we not only are addressing those needs, but actually deliver on the project. So good work by everybody. Thanks. Really appreciate that. All right. Well, that concludes our board reports. Let's move on to the general manager's report. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, and all the friends here, I wanted to first of all thank you for being here, and also thank our friends at Portland Community Media for hosting us here today. We love being in Northeast Portland. It's a great area, Dr. Bethel's district, and we're really pleased to be situated in this neighborhood. I wanted to call up John Gardner because I know many of the people here are really interested in the low-income fare program, and I just wanted to thank the board for your direction early on in this calendar year, and as part of your budget negotiations or deliberations last year to really have us focus on this. And again, John can give you an update on those programs and where we are with all of that. Just suffice to say, we've been at it for quite some time, are beginning to get some formative results, and John will give you an update on all of that. So, Mr. Gardner.
Thank you. Good morning, President Warner, members of the board. As Neil said, I'm going to provide a brief update on our progress in terms of researching the feasibility of a low-income fare program. But before I get started, I want to thank the folks from BRU and Opal who showed up today, because clearly this is going to take not only their participation in this room, but their engagement of community stakeholders outside to really lift this program to its potential fruition. So as a starting point for our research, I just wanted to remind everybody about the 4 areas that we've identified to serve as sort of programmatic framework for moving forward, right? In order to sort of see a successful program, we want to look at the lessons learned that are adopted and visible by those programs around the country, and we want our potential program to have a focus and a framework based on sustainability, be meaningful, so it's actually targeted towards the customers and the riders who really could benefit and need it, and be manageable. I think a little bit has been said about the potential administration cost and what that would take, and depending on the model you look at, it could be quite great. So at this point, and as you've heard earlier, we have contracted with 4 nines. We're very close to completing the research phase of our program. You can get a sense of the areas and the contracted work that 4 nines is actually providing for us. So I think earlier we talked about income thresholds and poverty levels and whatnot, and you'll see that what we'll be getting is sort of a program analysis of what it would look like at the 150%, 185%, 200% eligibility levels. So we've taken that into full consideration. We're excited to see the different trade-offs that will create for us. But ultimately, that's going to be part of what the potential recommendations include is here's the different program models at these different levels. And not only that, but all the sort of give and takes that this is going to require to move forward, both in terms of eligibility, where it's targeted, the administrative cost, the potential uptake of the program. So we're being pretty comprehensive in our approach to make sure whatever we gather is going to be fully informed by not just the existing programs, but the realities in our own local market. So now we're in the middle of our process. We're at the point of convening regional partners. And in addition to having sort of a regional task force, we're going to leverage the 92 agencies that I think were brought up earlier in terms of organizations already partnering with TriMet in terms of the Access Transit program. So these are the agencies that use that roughly $1.4 million to sort of provide subsidized transportation resources to tens of thousands of transit-dependent riders every year. So not only are we going to be engaging them to gather their feedback, their input, their recommendations, but also working with them to gather the feedback from their riders. So that feedback will be sort of formally integrated with the regional task force to come up with programmatic recommendations that you can all sort of see in terms of what's possible going forward. And so finally, the idea then would be to synthesize all of that information, much like the life report, but I think much more in terms of an operational strategy, one that we can use to solicit partnerships both outside of TriMet, but also potentially through the legislature or regional governments. And that's why it's so important to sort of go after high-level policy and decision makers in this process, because this is a pretty big lift. We've already identified 11 existing programs, and I think Seattle and San Francisco were 2 of those programs. For example, the administration costs of just launching the Orca Lift program, which we hope and expect to have come down and present to our regional task force and our community partners, was around just under $4 million to administer the program. So that sort of reality in terms of a long-term program, not just a pilot, you have to multiply that programmatic cost times 30 years, and you get a sense of the potential lift we're really trying to take on here. But I think we're up to the challenge. So that's sort of the program approach in terms of what we're doing. This is just a snapshot of what we've been doing and where we came from. What's exciting is to see the overlap between our Transit Equity Advisory Committee and OPAL in terms of we have OPAL members and BRU members on that committee. So our hope is that that communication line between TIAC and OPAL is occurring, and so their staff and their partners know what we've been working on. So you can see in March we adopted on TIAC low income fare as a program work area, as something that TIAC in itself can be working towards. And they've been very involved in sort of building out the programmatic areas of our research contract. They were actually first to see the first product, and so 49s actually came to our June meeting and presented the findings of what they saw across the country. So we're making sure that we're keeping them informed across the whole process. We came to you in July to sort of announce and make sure you were on the same page in terms of what we're doing and what our goals are. And in August, we met with Metro to sort of identify our process in terms of potential transit supporters and who we can get in a room to kind of help us with this community lift of not only researching, but ultimately recommending a funding and approach and a sort of implementation plan. Now in September, we are working to finalize sort of the cost models with 49s. They have all of the information. They have our survey information, which I'm not sure we fully actually shared with you, but that's completed and that's part of their analysis. And then next month, we'll begin our convenings, both the regional task force, but also a parallel community conversation. So we're having the same conversation at the same time, recognizing that the potential desire to be part of that outweighs any sort of ability to logistically convene that, so 92 and 12 members and whatnot and the other agencies. So we're having a parallel process, but ultimately all that information and all those findings will be integrated into one central recommendation that will be in our team's programmatic report, with the idea that by November we'll have not only a final report, but recommendations for the GM to consider in terms of how we can operationally move this idea forward. So again, right now we're close to completing the research. In about 3.5 weeks, we'll be convening our first series of meetings, and within the next 6 to 7 weeks, we'll have our final report.
Wow.
Questions?
Questions, comments from the board? Yes.
Yeah.
Director Esmond.
Yeah, John, like any, I'm sure, how do I say this? Are you, when you work with the other jurisdictions around the country, you said 11, are you physically going there and picking their brains how they did it, or using their, hey, can we take this and adopt it over here?
Mm-hmm.
So
what
instead of reinventing the wheel,
right,
because just to save time and get the program rolled out.
Right. No, I agree, and this is not about being first. This is about being better. And so we have 6 to 8 pages of line by line analysis of those other 11
Mm-hmm.
programs. But to be fair, those aren't necessarily 11 low-income fare programs, as you've heard this morning. Some of those include bulk sales programs, which we have at TriMet already. So it's mostly conversations by phone to kind of ask them, here's what our research found. What's the realities in terms of the financial impacts? How do you verify and validate income levels? And who do you use if you're not a county system, which the Seattle King County system has the ability to leverage their county operations? How do you leverage community-based organizations to be part of that verification process and that dissemination process in terms of the passes? Now, we do enjoy the opportunity to integrate a low-income fare program if we can find a way to finance it and get it supported with e-fare. It makes it much more doable. So, I mean, in the past, I think that's why we weren't able to probably move forward that in cost. So, I mean, when we talk to some of these transit partners around the country, they see that we're in a really good position if we can sort of get critical mass of community support to actually move something forward. But there's a lot of lessons learned there, and sort of don't, learn from us and don't do this.
Yeah. Quickly, do you have a ballpark number?
It's early, so on the
ballpark.
The problem is about and I think the folks from Opal got this right. It's about adoption. If we had 100% adoption, you're talking about over an $18 million program.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think that's going to be part of the process. I think what's going to be what we'll have in our next presentation will be ballpark figures, because part of this is about agreeing on a conservative or progressive sort of adoption level, but also the income threshold. What do we land on? Where is their interest? Is it 200%? What is the usage going to be? What's the administrative cost of working with dozens of nonprofits to actually do the validation? What's the the actual fee structure? So I mean, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, and that's what the community process is for, not just TriMet saying here's the answer. And so that's why maybe we're a little slower than the report you've received, but I feel like we're going to be incredibly operational when we give you guys different strategies and models to consider.
All right, thank you. Please.
I have a question for you. So you've described partnering with Metro and organizing a task force with other interested members of the community. What TriMet, we are very excited about this and very committed to it. What are you hearing from these partners and the potential task force members? Are they equally enthusiastic about this idea?
Well, to be fair, we're going with the willing. So we're reaching out by county to folks who have expressed support for public transportation, but also support to sort of target areas and issues that affect low-income individuals across the region. So, I mean, we're definitely going with a team that we think we don't have to convince that public transportation is a good thing. It really is more about how do you operationalize this idea and create, essentially identify a new funding stream to make this a reality? And how does that look across different jurisdictions? And how do we build a critical mass outside a small group of electeds? At the same time, we build interest and support from a large group of community providers and riders.
Thank you.
Nope, no questions for me. Thorough presentation.
Right.
Yeah, good presentation. I guess I would, when we actually look at the data, I would like to understand what people are learning about the participation rate, because I look at some of the information like Seattle and others, it seems low, and the question is, why is that, and is this something that can be improved in the development of the program, or just what are the barriers to that? Because it would be very interesting to understand that in terms of if we have a program, we want as many people to take advantage of it, frankly, as who can.
I completely agree. The last thing I'd like to mention that wasn't really part of the presentation, but I think it's been brought up a lot, was sort of the poverty level and sort of what rate to look at. And obviously later you'll be talking about our Title VI program update, where we did set or reaffirm our 150% poverty level. Now, in doing so, we had very specific conversations with TIAC and others about that's for our Title VI analysis. And if we were to be able to adopt a low-income fair program, it would not necessarily be at 150% level. It could be all the way up to, as you saw in the presentation, 200%. So we want to make sure that it's not getting confused and we're not stuck on that.
Right.
But having said that, I think there's some confusion about what that means. That's about sensitivity, not eligibility. Right? It's about how do we begin our analysis of different areas. And unfortunately, when you start looking at sort of regional poverty maps and what that means, if we were, for example, to go from 150% to 200%, that would impact our ability to sort of take action in communities like Humboldt, Piedmont, King Neighborhood in North Portland, Forest Grove, Aloha, Montevilla, and North Clackamas County, because of the way that poverty looks in terms of what's at 150% or 200%. So we did consider that in our calculations, but as much as that would sort of broaden sort of the view, it would also eliminate sort of historical, sort of unfortunately, areas of poverty that at this point we weren't ready to move forward on. So.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks, John.
I appreciate it. Good report. Thank you.
Yes, and again, thank you, John. Again, some really excellent work going on. I really appreciate that. I did want to take this opportunity just for a couple other updates, and then we'll bring in both Randy and our auditors for a couple other very quick reports for you. But this is the first meeting since we had that shutdown of the Rose Quarter, and I really wanted to take the opportunity publicly to thank our maintenance away staff, our contractors, everybody who did a phenomenal job of getting an awful lot of work done in that 2-week period. They nailed the 2-week period. We started service. We ended service. We started service just as we predicted. But in addition to the staff who actually did that physical construction work, which was hard enough, I really wanted to acknowledge the great work of our customer service team, of our bus operators, of our transit supervisors, and everybody else who had a part of making that a success. I think at one calculation that I saw, our rail line, our system begins to carry something on the order of 10,000 people across the river during a normal commute hour. So you begin to, first of all, realize how much our region now depends on a rail system. But also, when we take these times to do important state of good repair work, what a challenge it is for the organization to align not only the construction work and the technical work that goes with it, but the customer service and bus bridging and other kinds of support for our customers at the same time. And again, I think all of that was done in an extraordinary way. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge and thank all the staff who participated in that. It was a great effort. And I also want to acknowledge Doug Kelsey, who was sort of the conductor of the orchestra as we went through that. It was a great job. For the most part, everybody played in tune, but again, we also do a very elaborate lessons learned out of these events because we know we need to do more of these upcoming. And again, as many of you who have been following our capital repair and maintenance program know that we have another major event coming now scheduled for next May, which is the replacement of the switches at the 11th Morrison Yamhill turnaround, which again was a part of that original Banfield Light Rail line, which had its 30th anniversary since our last meeting as well. So just wanted to note that. Also just wanted to give you a quick update on ridership. Obviously, the repair work at Rose Quarter did affect ridership in the month of August. But we actually, interestingly enough, because of the orange line, we still saw an increase in overall rail ridership compared to a year ago. We did see a decrease in bus ridership, which has been something you've been following. We've been following all year, and it was in the same orders of magnitude. Bus ridership was flat, so sort of keep it at that at the very high level. But again, I would note that Bernie and the staff are doing what I would call a very deep dive into the ridership patterns and trends we're beginning to see. One of the interesting characteristics that we're starting to see is for the park and rides that are further out on the system, we're beginning to see less utilizations. We can also track almost one for one the reduced gas prices means reduced ridership, which means reduced park and ride occupancy as well. So we do have those factors going on in our local economy. That said, I think TriMet ridership is still holding pretty firm, and we're very pleased for that compared to, frankly, some of our peers around the country these days. Unless there are some other questions, I wanted to bring Randy up to do a little update on our hiring process. You heard at an earlier meeting some criticisms that perhaps we weren't being able to achieve the numbers of recruits that we need to maintain and grow our operation. I would tell you, and I think Randy will reiterate, that hiring in this market, where we actually, in Portland, Oregon, hard to believe, we actually have an unemployment rate lower than the national average here, which we haven't seen for a long while. It continues to be a challenge, but our great team has been meeting that. So Randy, perhaps a quick update from you.
Thank you. Good morning. TriMet is hiring. I don't know if you've noticed.
I've noticed that.
I wanted to give you an update, particularly on our mini-run operator recruitment, which is our part-time operators, and that's the route which part-time operators for becoming a full-time operator. So that's our pipeline. And we know our hiring goals for some time, for some number of years as we built to deploy and open up the orange line, has been to hire 20 new mini-run operators every 3 weeks for training classes. And that translates into about 347 or so mini-run operators a year. The program is selective. We only hire about 14% of the applicants who apply. But that still means that we're going to have about 2,500 applications per year, translated into a weekly goal of about 60 applicants per week. And that's includes a little bit of margin for error for economic changing times. And we maintained that good rate through the opening of the orange line. But as the orange line came online, we noticed a decline in our applications beginning in the latter part of 2015 and into the spring of 2016 as the economy picked up and unemployment dropped. So for the full year of 2015, we had an average of 33 applications per week, again, compared to that target of 60. And by June of 2016, we were down to around 24 applications per week. So precipitous drop, and yet our goal was still the same. So we marshaled a cross-functional team to look at solutions to bring that application rate back up to our target of 60. And that group was led by Christopher Parra, who's done a really fine job marshaling the resources, implementing a number of solution steps. And I'm pleased to say that we are back up. We've made up our deficit, and we are tracking at that 60, actually plus applications per week. Some of the things that we did to solve the problem was first, but not foremost actually, was to increase the training rate from $11.21 an hour to $14.25 an hour. That was a temporary increase with the consent and advice of the ATU. We also began marketing more heavily the fact that beginning with our last contract implementation, our part-time bus operators, our mini-run operators, have the advantage of full-time operator benefits package. Certainly we increased the number of recruiting and what we call pop-up and career event participation, and increased our media and social media advertising. You probably noticed the TriMet is hiring on the buses. We also have automated stop announcements on the trains and the buses. On a temporary basis, a change to reduce the license requirements from 5 years to 3. We're monitoring that very closely for obvious safety reasons, but that is in line. The 3-year requirement is in line with many of our competitor agencies throughout the country. So again, with the advice and consent of the ATU, we are temporarily reducing that requirement to 3 years. We've also reduced the waiting time for reapplication for unsuccessful applicants from 12 months to 6 months. Our communications team has been fabulous in producing a number of videos that show not only the training process, but a day in the life of the operator to give people online and in other forums really a visual picture of what it is like to be an operator. We've increased the geographic outreach for our advertising and also begun to recruit outside of the Portland area, even beginning to look at other cities where they're, by the nature of their economy, have lots of licensed drivers. For example, Las Vegas, we're participating in a career fair in that community. And so the results of that are shown since we began the program in early June. These columns show the number of applications, how that compares to the applications from the prior week, how that compares to the 2015 average, how it compares to our target, the cumulative weekly average applications, and then in the far right column, the deficit to target. As you can see, those negative red numbers all the way through the week of September 5th, where we finally have made up the deficit, and we are tracking at that 60 for the period, 60 applications per week, and actually are ahead of that. So we have just done a very, very quick turnaround. It's hard to tell which of the solution steps were the primary causes because we did a lot of things at one time, but the net result is that we've made up the deficit and we are tracking where we need to be to continue to have those 20 new mini run operators every 3 weeks. So here are the results by the number. This is just a chart to show the first row, some demographic information for all of our current MAX and bus operators compared to the operators hired since that June 16th. I would just note that in the hired columns, 56 male, 74, we've actually hired more than that, but they haven't started yet. So this is active employees. We're actually fully subscribed for our next couple of training sessions. On average, for all of our operators, we currently have a female participation rate of 30% and minority participation rate of 28%. And veterans 6%. The more recent recruiting that we've done has actually resulted in a little bit more inclusive hiring. The female participation is still the same, but the minority participation rate is 39%, and we've upped our veterans participation rate to 11%. So we've not only made up the deficit, but we've done so in a little bit more inclusive manner. So I think that we have, again, hats off to the recruiting team and all the folks that participated in this turnaround to really shore up the recruiting and get the word out and make our hiring effort very public in a very successful way.
Excellent.
Happy to answer any questions.
You probably have, but I just want to double check. There's various groups that work with at-risk youth and not only youth, but people like Women in the Trades program,
yes.
Constructing Hope, Hard Hats, Helmets to Hard Hats. Have we touched them?
All those organizations,
okay,
yes.
Great. All right, thank you. Thank you for your work.
Those participation rates, keep us briefed on that. That's really heading the right way. I'd like to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Good.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Board President, just to continue, perhaps, I would just note that Randy will insist that we look at the sustainability of this effort as we begin our budget negotiations next year or deliberations next year. I'll be in a negotiation, you'll be in deliberation. But nonetheless, it is an important effort. I think it has to recognize that we are in a different employment market and that we really need to sort of pay attention to this much more than we have in the past. And I'm really grateful for Randy and Christopher and others' help in doing that.
Good.
Finally, I want to bring up Julie Desimoni from Moss Adams. As Board Member Stovall noted, during the Finance and Audit Committee, we had a presentation, and the committee actually had a conversation with our auditors this year. We're always very proud at TriMet that we're one of the first agencies out of the box with our fiscal year audits, and we work really hard to make sure that that's successful. And on that report is our independent auditor here, and I'll turn it over to Julie.
Perfect, thank you. So I am the partner on the engagement, and I will also note, on a side note, Director Stovall, I also think they used the word fun and audit in the same sentence, and I'm not sure in 16 years with Moss I've ever heard that, so I appreciate that very much as well. Give you some results in the audit process. So these are the services that we provided to TriMet this year. We have a whole host of audit reports that come out during the course of the year or during the course of the end of the year. Under governmental auditing standards, we also issue opinions on your uniform grant guidance, which used to be known as the single audit or the A133 audit. We also have to issue a report on Oregon state compliance with the Oregon minimum standards. That's about 13 additional compliance requirements that are required by the state we need to take a look at. And then finally, your 2001 revenue bonds have an indenture, has a requirement that we have to meet regarding how those bonds are in compliance or how the financial reporting works to those compliance. So I'm happy to report that we had an unmodified, which in the general world is a clean opinion on all of those. We had no findings either in the single audit or the uniform grant guidance audit, nor in the Oregon minimum standards audit. The 2001 revenue bond report was clean, and the only thing we have yet to complete, which generally has to trail the audit, is what's called the data collection form or the final reporting to the federal government. That is well on its way and will be issued by either this week or early next week. A couple of other things during the course of the audit. What we do is we generally start with a meeting with the Finance Committee. We talk to them about our perceived risks of the audit and any concerns they may have that we can address into our audit. We spend about a week at what we call our interim, which is a risk assessment, and our testing of internal controls. We have a team of about 10 people. That also encompasses some of our internal control testing over your IT processes. We have another group that comes out for 3 weeks during final field work, which happened in the early August, and then we're here to we issued, I think, the statements last week and are here to present today. And during the course of that, I need to let you know of any communications or required communications that we need to make with the board. The first thing is what our responsibility is under the audit. The financial statements are your financial statements, they're management's financial statements. We just place an opinion upon those financial statements through all of our work. In the significant accounting policies, the reason we bring this up and why it's important is because if those significant policies change, then your numbers could change pretty significantly. For example, when the new pension standards, when the new OPEB standard will come in, that's significant. You need to know if that is an event that occurred. We did not expect that to occur in the current year, as there's been no major statement changes, nor any operational changes that we expect that to change. There are quite a few management judgments and accounting estimates. All of those are in accordance with the industry, and the methodology used by management is sound. We had no audit adjustments that were made or passed during the course of the audit. No consultations with any other accountants that we know of. This gets to opinion shopping. We need to let you know if we know of that. No disagreements with management or difficulties in performing the audit. It is a tremendous amount. When I was just looking at the binder last night, and our audit binder is all electronic, and that audit binder has about 2,200 working papers that are sitting in it to finish up this audit. Times that by probably 15 is the amount of work that actually has to come to us before even starting the audit. So a tremendous amount of information changes hands. Everybody on staff is willing to talk with us right away and get through the course of the audit, which allows us to issue probably the first one in the nation, quite honestly. And then no issues discussed with management prior to our attention. Again, that's required communication. So that's what I have for you. If you have any questions for me, it was a fun audit. But I'm
I like
an
it when
auditor.
it's short and sweet. Thank you.
I know.
Questions, comments from the board?
Thank you, Julie. As I referenced in the Finance and Audit Committee, tremendous effort from you and your team over at Moss Adams, but then also our team here, starting with Neil, his leadership, Dee Brookshire, her incredible team, and then we've got I'm going to forget somebody, Lori. I don't want to forget Lori because Lori's the key person that actually works with Moss Adams in doing all of the work and coordinating those 2,200 times 15 numbers of documents, getting those over. So it's a tremendous effort, and to have this level of presentation with no findings is tremendous. So thank you, the entire team. It's great to be on a board, part of an organization that continues to have stellar responses like this. And again, I don't want to miss the opportunity to just say that we do have AAA bond ratings across the board, which we'll talk about here in just a few moments. But we are one of the top agencies in the entire country when it comes to those bond ratings. So we're excited to have not just this phenomenal report, but the things that lead up to it that give us this confidence that when we do our reporting and financial information, it's stellar. There was something that you mentioned in the Finance and Audit Committee, Julie, that I'll push you to actually reference here if you can. But not only did we go through an audit, but Moss Adams periodically goes through an audit of delivered to them by I think it's the federal transit agencies that come in and actually review what they do. And if you could give just a brief summary of how that went for Moss Adams this year, that'd be helpful.
Right. So the auditors get audited.
Yes.
Yeah, fun times. So they come out and they take a look at our work, our audit methodology, and it's to the grant. So under the A133 requirements, because it was the prior year. And we did just receive the pass rating. So that is the highest rating you can receive on those. So it was a pretty in-depth. It was my first time going through it as an audit partner. It was much easier when I was a staff going through it. So it was a great rating. So very exciting. And they just handed that down last week, I think.
So for our stakeholders, community members, riders, folks that look to us, to drive confidence in what we're doing here, and for the board, our fellow board members. It's not only do we go through a great audit ourselves, but the auditors got audited and said the processes and procedures that they utilize to review us got a pass rating. So we've got a lot of confidence that the work we're doing here in regards to financial reporting, following up on all this stuff is recognized as doing a very good job. And again, to Neil, to Dee, to Lori, and everybody involved, thank you for your dedication in making this happen. It is not easy at all.
You're here. Anything else? I guess I'd just say I think this is an example where this will probably never hit the press as a discussion or a story, but I think this is worthy of some sort of article by one of the news media, but I suspect it never will. So for that I'm sad, and because I think it is a good story and does speak well of TriMet, our staff, our auditors, and everybody's involved. So again, thanks to everybody. I agree. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
and
thank
we'll
you.
look forward to seeing you next year, maybe. Huh?
Thank you, Julie. And Mr. Board President, if I might, just one other final comment in my report. Slipping out quietly of TriMet employment is somebody that I have worked with for a number of years and has been a key part of the General Manager's office, and that is Sandy Vinci, who is retired.
That's why I didn't see her today.
Since our last meeting. And I just wanted to publicly acknowledge again that TriMet is a much better place because of her work over the last many years. I won't embarrass her by saying how many, but her many years. And again, I actually had a social meeting with her last night. I promised I wouldn't sniff my way through the meeting, as others who have been on TV this week may have, if you've been following the debate, the post-debate issues. But again, I wanted to acknowledge her great work for us. And again, you all have worked with her as well as part of the General Manager's office, and so I wanted to make sure you were aware of that transition. Again, thank you, Sandy, for all that you've done.
We wish her well.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
That concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Anything questions for the General Manager? Seeing none, then let's move on to our consent agenda. And for those in the audience or anybody watching, items appearing on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion or questions by requesting such action prior to consideration of this portion of the agenda. We have two items on the agenda, consent agenda this morning: approval of the board minutes for August 10th, 2016, and then a resolution 16-09-56, which is authorizing a contract with Alliant Insurance Company, Inc. for insurance broker services. So is there any member of the board that would like to pull an item from the agenda or has any questions about an item before we take action? No. Seeing none, is there then a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I hear a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. All right, let's move on to our resolutions, where we will talk first about some bonds on a couple issues. The first one is Resolution 16-09-57, which is authorizing the issuance of revenue bonds.
And Mr. Board President, members of the board, I'd like to introduce Peter Ross, who's our financial advisor, as well as Dee Brookshire, our CFO. Just a very quick introduction, I'll turn it over to them. As you know, in order to do our regular business of replacing the capital that Board Member Stovall was so eloquent about earlier, sometimes requires financing. And so as a public agency, we do that through competitive markets. And again, we have a couple of these financings, one associated with new revenue bonds, and the second with refinancing some current bonds to hopefully take advantage of lower rates. And so with that, we'll start with the senior lien payroll tax bonds 2016. These are the new issues that have been part of our finance plan and capital plan for some time. And I'll turn this over to Dee to begin that conversation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we have two issues to talk about, as General Manager has described. The first one we will talk about is our revenue bonds. Where do I point this? There we go. Okay, we'll talk about the purpose of the bonds. We're estimating that this will be up to 110 million in size, and it will fund projects that will include bus replacements, both for the it will be vehicle replacements. It'll be buses, both fleet replacements and for service expansion, non-revenue vehicles and equipment. It would also fund the transit police project, the headquarters project, and also other qualifying projects. We suspect there may be a tail on e-fare, and there are some others, but the total of the issue is 110 million. So we wanted to show you how this fit within our strategic financial plan guideline on debt management. The guideline says that our debt policy establishes that debt service on senior lien payroll tax revenue bonds must be less than 6% of continuing revenues throughout the long-term forecast. This issue will maximize the debt capacity allowed by the 6% debt ceiling in the SFP through fiscal year 17. As our revenues continue to grow, and it does show an incredible long span of increase, we expect that the revenue stream will allow additional debt capacity for subsequent financing in future years. Our forecast currently estimates that we'll be going to market every 2 to 3 years. And the second piece of the SFP says that the financial manager should seek a credit rating that achieves a balance between minimizing borrowing costs and maximizing financial flexibility. And I'm proud to say that TriMet has certainly met that. Our senior lien debt is currently rated AAA by both S&P, Standard & Poor's, and Moody's. That makes it the highest rated agency in the nation of any kind, not just transit, but any public agency that has this type of issue is below our rating. Do you have anything further on that? Nope.
Nope.
So there you go, another victory lap for us, right?
Another good story if somebody'd like to write it.
Yeah. Exactly. So the next steps on this are that this is a future issue. What we needed today was the board authorization so that we can post the notice of the revenue bond for public action. If anyone, we need, let me see, after 60 days, if 5% of the membership or the electorate protest, then we have to pull this back. We can't do the issue. We've never had that experience. This is a state of Oregon requirement. So we'll post the notice today. 60 days from today is November 27th. And this is when we expect to initiate the bond document preparation, assuming no protest. And then in mid-January, we're targeting mid-January currently as a sale, but it's dependent upon market conditions. So this is all preliminary. Did you have any questions at this point on the revenue bonds?
Questions or comments? Director Stovall, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of talk primarily to the board about kind of this and what this does for our strategic financial plan and how it keeps us in alignment. We hold a 6% target in regards to how much. I'm not going to get too specific as to senior lien and all this stuff, but debt. We have a debt cap of 6%. And that's a fairly conservative debt cap across the other agencies across the country. But that's what we've outlined as we set forth in the strategic financial plan. At some point, we'll have to revisit that as we look at the total capacity that will be required when we do state of good repair, all of the capital requests that we have over the next decade and a half, when we got the light rail vehicle replacements. But at this point, based on what we've outlined in the strategic financial plan, we're at 6%. This moves us right up to that 6% cap. But what it does is it really prepares us to be able to take in consideration all of the things that we're looking at doing over the next few years in regards to the capital that we need to invest in for our system. And we also have the benefit of growing revenues that will actually essentially keep that percentage at or below that 6% target. So as our revenues grow and our debt stays the same, that essentially the percentage will either stay the same or primarily drop if our revenues are growing. So we reviewed this in its entirety at the Finance and Audit Committee, feel very comfortable that looking at this bond at this point in time is the right thing to do and go ahead to move forward, and feel very comfortable that moving right to the 6% cap is something that we're, at least I'm supportive of. We didn't talk about in its entirety about whether we support it or not, but I'm supportive of moving forward with this bond to ensure that we've got the capacity to be able to grow into the capital projects that we now have on tap, and feel comfortable with its relationship to the strategic financial plan.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for Dee? Or all right, seeing none. Thank you. Then is the board ready to?
Very impressive.
Thank you. Is the board ready then to offer a motion to approve Resolution 16-09-57?
Make a motion.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none then. All in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-09-57, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? None. The motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. So let's move on then to Resolution 16-09-58, which is authorizing the issuance of grant recipient revenue refunding bonds. Won't say that quickly, okay?
So, yeah, not in
Thank
two words,
you.
but let me just note, yeah, as a sort of an introduction to this, with Mr. Ross's help, we were able to, and your approval, actually secure some much reduced interest rates on some of our payroll tax bonds earlier this year. And obviously, we continue to review all of our debt on a regular basis to sort of make sure that we're getting the best rates the market offers. And so Dee and Peter will give you an update on some opportunities that we may see in the market. But again, opportunities is again, I think, the key word there. So Dee.
Thank you. So let me run through the details of this one a little quickly. So the purpose of this bond is simply to refund $81.2 million in Series 2011 bonds for savings. The size of the proposed issue is $78 million. Current market results, which actually I think are about 4 or 5 days old, are $3.8 million on NPV savings. That means over the life of the bond issue remaining, and it's 11 years we're proposing, we'll save $3.8 million. Current percent of savings is 4.7%, and the debt policy requires that we have at least a 3% savings in order to undertake a refunding. So that's where we are today. Before I go into the security features, I'd like for Peter to talk a little bit about the market variations that cause these numbers to change.
When we started out looking at this, I think in early August, the savings were about $1 million higher. Rates go up and down, as we know, as we read in the paper. And so right now, this was as middle of September. As of yesterday, rates are about 200,000 or 300,000 to the good. So what we're going to do is once we get the authorization, assuming the authorization comes here, we have to go through a process with the State Treasurer's Office to get their preliminary approval to this advance for funding. All things, if the markets continue to be stable from this point on, we would target a sale in around October 25th. But most importantly, we really follow this on a day-to-day basis. If we think the market rates are not producing the results that we want, we'd pull this back. We would not, but we want to remain flexible and opportunistic. And that's exactly as Neil was mentioning what happened with the refinancing that we did earlier this year. Rates seemed to move up in the beginning of the year. Got to a point where the savings, even though it complied with your policy, were not quite what we had hoped for or wanted to achieve. We were patient. Rates came down. We were positioned well in the market, and then we were able to hit it and achieve very compelling savings. So we'd be using the same strategy. We have a target date. It really depends on what happens in the market and the interest rates. And if everything falls into place, we would hit that date. If not, we will just wait and see what happens and position ourselves to hit a great date.
Thank you. Now moving on to the security features for the debt itself. It is the same as it was for the 2011s originally. All grant receipts will be used for debt service prior to any other purpose. Our federal grant funds under the IGA with Metro include the Surface Transportation Block Grant and the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Funding. Federal money that Metro controls. Metro is obligated under the IGA to program $16 million per year to pay this debt. Those are our committed funds, and the allocation of the committed funds has precedence over all other Metro allocations. And we are also pledging, as a double barrel pledge, if you will, TriMet's Section 5307 funds, which is our share of the 5307 Urbanized Area Formula Program funds for the current UZA urban region, which is Portland and Portland and Vancouver, Washington. We're currently getting about 88% of that. So next steps on this, we have our board authorization today. There is no 60-day waiting period. So we expect to receive the ratings on October 11th. We will post the official statement on October 14th. Price transaction will occur on October 25th with a closing on December 1st. Again, as Peter had described earlier, subject to change depending on market conditions. But right now, this is our target. Any questions?
Yes.
Please.
Would you go back to the former slide? You mentioned something with the Portland, Vancouver.
Yeah. Okay.
Help me out.
Oh, sure. No
Please.
problem. So
Not too deep, Dee.
Okay. So under the FAST Act, there is a section of federal funding called 5307. That's just the name of it. So this is programmed funding that goes to the different urbanized area. They call it a UZA. That's their FTA's abbreviation for urbanized area. Our urbanized area is, and this is a little unique, this doesn't happen all over the country, we're the ones that actually straddle 2 states. So our UZA is a big circle of our, it actually includes SMART and in Wilsonville,
Yep.
and us and CTRAN. So our service areas are combined are one urbanized area. And annually, we come to an agreement to distribute those funds based on the National Transit Database factors, like passenger miles per road or transit. There's a whole bunch of factors.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Sorry.
It's
Okay, so those are basically what we're
algorithm
using
someplace.
to redistribute those, and it's as sorry, I don't want to get complicated
No.
here, but I'm happy to go into it
No,
in depth
you're
with
good.
you privately. But
No.
it's okay. So currently, the distribution allows for approximately 88% of that to come to
Okay.
TriMet.
And some of it sits in reserve.
No, it doesn't. It's all
always-
distributed. 100% of it is distributed, but it goes to us, SMART, and
Yeah.
CTRAN.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? Seems like good business sense to try to save some money if we can.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is, if the conditions aren't right, we won't do it.
Right.
So it seems like a good thing to give our staff the authorization to move forward with this. So with that then, is there a motion to approve Resolution 16-09-58?
So moved.
Have a motion?
I'll second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor of the motion approving Resolution 16-09-58, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Let's move on to Resolution 16-09-59, which is authorizing the purchase of real property located at 325 Northeast Hogan Drive in Gresham. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, this is a parcel that we were aware of that came on the market. The parcel is directly adjacent to the light rail line in Gresham. It was formerly an RV sales and servicing site. So we looked at it as a great opportunity and began a due diligence review over the last couple of months as we've been looking at this. And this resolution would authorize us to actually make that purchase. The reason we think this is such a great opportunity is, number one, its adjacency to our current facilities and line. But the other part of it is really when you begin to look at our overall program that is funded by the increase in the payroll tax that you approved last September, a year ago, we know that we're going to be increasing the size of our bus fleet by, I think the number in your report is about 124 buses by 2020. At the same time, we'll be rebuilding for long-term capacity the Powell bus garage. So we will actually just work really hard to sort of keep that in operation during that rebuilding process, but there will always be some impact on capacity as we go through that program, a multi-year program. In addition, the PAL division program that we are anticipating will require somewhere between 26 and 28 new articulated buses. So literally speaking, we are running out of places that are efficient to park all the buses that we need to service our growing system. So for at least the short term, until the PAL garage is refinished and we take some additional steps to increase bus parking capacity, we think this is a very high value proposition for us. We also think because of adjacency to the rail line, it has long-term value to us in terms of being a good strategic investment for us. We have been working with the city of Gresham on this and will continue to do that. I think the current utilization, if we sort of roll, for example, new buses onto the lot, will be very minor changes to the site to begin with, and then over time we can begin to consider whether other investments on this piece of property make sense for us. With that, we have others who can sort of speak to the proposed plan and or the business details, but again, my recommendation, I think this is a very important and very strategic acquisition for TriMet and recommend your approval.
Does the director from Gresham have any comments or questions for the general manager?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Of course, Neil has spoken to me about this a few times in regards to it being in my district, and actually only about 5 minutes from where I live. So the one thing that I've highlighted in regards to kind of the future, 242nd Hogan basically is going to have some significant improvements on the north end. As soon as we can get JPAC and Impact to approve all the funds we need for that. So the overall goal and plan is to have 4 lanes going all the way from I-84, potentially all the way down to Highway 212, down into Clackamas County. And so I know there's some expansion needs that potentially will be desirable in the future right through that section of where this property sits. And Neil and I have already had an opportunity to talk about it, but that's something that we're aware of kind of globally, both at the city and during this purchase as we move forward. But it's something that I think will impact us in the future. But it's really a long-term transportation solution through East County. And this property sits right on Hogan 242nd, and will potentially be impacted by that as that expansion occurs. But just wanted to kind of highlight that. Other than that, I think its proximity right at the end. It literally is right at the end of the max alignment. I think it's crucial and critical that we move forward with this to ensure that we can take a look at how do we manage that property around our assets.
And it's my expectation that the city and the county and the region will work with us if we move forward this property to minimize impacts and again, help us make the property even more useful in the future. I suspect you've already had discussions.
We've had many of those discussions with the city, and obviously they'll be continuing as we formulate more long-term plans for the site. I would also note that there's also the intention to sort of bring another through street in an east-west direction in the vicinity of the site, and so our work with the city of Gresham is to sort of make sure that is at the edge of the site, not dividing it, but at the edge. And we've had very cooperative conversations with the staff about that so far. So,
will we be seeing more of these? Looking towards the future out in my district, just curious.
Well, certainly you'll be seeing a lot more if we're successful in advancing the division BRT as it's proposed, and there'll be some acquisitions associated with that. Not maintenance facilities, but actual right-of-way required for construction, as well as although that I might note is very minor in the division bus corridor. But certainly more so on the Southwest Corridor as that plan's developed. There is, for example, a plan for another light rail operations base associated with the Southwest Corridor. So those will all be discussions, and the board would see all of those in due course. And again, lots of discussion and lots of environmental work and other due diligence before any other acquisition would come to you. I think one of the things we are doing, and I appreciate the question because it allows me to elaborate a little bit more, which is that we do have, and Shelley Lomax is leading it, sort of a facilities a strategy that we'll be sharing with the board, which really begins to look at this ramp up of bus service that we have planned over the next 10 years, together with the needs for the rail system, and we know the first step of that ramp up is what we're doing in the Powell Garage, but there will be next steps after the Powell Garage is completed in terms of improving our facilities. And there'll be some trade-offs between going to new sites versus remodeling or expanding current sites. And so we're in the midst of that review now, so we call that our facility strategic plan, which is underway and will be part of our upcoming briefings to you as we complete that. The goal for completing that overall plan is the end of this calendar year.
Well, good. I'm glad I asked the question because I was going to ask you that question anyhow. If we had a forecast of capital projects over dollar amount, 3 to 5 years out.
Indeed, we do. And again, our Finance Committee received a briefing on that in terms of our current update of that plan at their meeting this morning.
Right.
And you'll obviously see much more of that as the next few months roll out.
And we have a brokerage firm who looks out for scouts.
Yes, we do. I might note that both on the sort of scouting side, but we have a very capable real estate staff of our own who sort of keep good tabs on that. But you might recall something on the order of a year ago, the board did approve 2 contracts with brokerage firms that are actually marketing parcels that TriMet has that are opportunity parcels, and there's been some good progress on that too.
Okay, good.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, is the board ready to proffer a motion to approve of Resolution 16-09-59?
So moved, Mr. President.
I'll second it.
Motion, I have a second, thank you. Any further discussion by the board? All right, then, all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-09-59, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. And the final resolution we have today is a Resolution 16-09-60, which is approving the 2016 Title VI Program and Policies. Mr. General Manager, you tee this up.
Board President, members of the board, perhaps Jake and John would like to come up in case there are questions from you. But I would just note that this comes a requirement of the Federal Transit Administration that every 3 years we review and update our Title VI requirements. And as you know, 3 years ago, we, in a little bit more hurried process than we would have liked, we brought to the board the original Title VI plan and process that we use. And over these last 3 years, I think you've seen, as we've done service reports, as we've looked at fare programs, and even our Fastpass policies, the value that this Title VI review has brought to our deliberations, and that allows us to be very, frankly, deliberate about who's affected and who's not. And to be particularly focused on disparate groups. We've done a review. We've reviewed this with TIAC and many other community stakeholders. I'll let John and or Jake do a quick update. I know that many of you heard a much more thorough report on this at our briefing earlier this summer. So I don't want to belabor it, but I think it's important to just note the changes from our last adopted report to this report.
Right. Thank you, and good to see you again, members of the board, President Warner. So just briefly, I inherited a fantastic team in terms of Jake War and Monica Johnson. Monica in her work sort of keeping TriMet as one of the nation's leaders in DBE contracting, and Jake in his work in keeping us as sort of the setters and trendsetters of Title VI. And so Jake has led our efforts over the last 9 months in coordinating our program update, as Neil discussed. And we have some program changes we're recommending, and that will keep us as one of the most progressive and sensitive transit properties in terms of our Title VI analysis. And I think we've sent out a lot of sort of one-page updates on that, as well as presented in August what those changes were. But I'll ask Jake to kind of walk through the 3 major changes.
Yeah, good morning, members of the board. So as we pointed out at the board briefing in August, there were three major areas where we propose some changes to our policies. And these are also areas where the board has to explicitly approve and adopt the policies. So those are under our major service change policy, which determines when we do a Title VI equity analysis. And we proposed changing that from an old threshold of a 25% change to a 15% change, counting as major under that policy. We also proposed tracking changes over the course of 3 years to get cumulative impacts and cumulative changes if they reached that threshold as well, instead of just per service change. The other changes that we proposed were to change our threshold of what constitutes a potential disparate impact on minority populations or disproportionate burden on low-income populations to be more statistically valid. So before, basically any difference between the community impacted, the percentage of the low-income or minority population impacted, and the average overall population for the district, we said any difference, even a 1% difference, constituted a potential disproportionality. We proposed changing that to a 3% threshold to acknowledge margins of error in the data, to make that a more statistically valid measure. And then the other piece that was really based, in addition to the major service change, on a lot of feedback from TIAC as well as the community, was to incorporate other considerations besides just looking at population. We acknowledged that the impacts of transit changes, service changes, is a lot more about who just lives along those corridors. It's about what populations and riders are accessing. So we added language to incorporate considerations of access to jobs, access to education, healthcare, and actually food as important additional considerations when we're looking at the overall equity impacts. So those are the major highlights of what we are proposing that's different from our last Title VI program update. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the gritty details if you have any.
Dr. Beth, do you have any further information from TIAC that you wanted to share on this one?
Nothing further at this point. Sure, there will be many more comments coming as we continue to proceed with this.
Okay.
But it is one of interest and of participation during TIAC.
So again, remind me the process from here after we endorse this for you.
So essentially, we once we have your official documented approval of the program and the policies, then we submit it to FTA, and there's an online system, and we submit the document to them. They review at their own timeline, presumably, and then they issue, if they have feedback or questions, they will follow up in communication with us. The way it worked in 2013 was pretty quickly. I think about 2 months later, we received a letter with their stated concurrence with the program.
Okay. And my assumption is we've also been coordinating with them so they know what we're doing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
Good. All right.
Is there a regional FTA office in the Northwest, or?
Seattle. And so, as Jake said, we have spoken to our regional officer about our programmatic changes and answered any questions he had. So,
yeah, I would think they're pleased with these kind of changes, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, again, TriMet's a leader in this area.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're becoming more sensitive to potential changes and the impacts that would have on the community. So, they're interested in make sure, just like our own management, that this doesn't create undue staff burdens, but we're comfortable with the changes and our ability to manage them.
Okay. Did you have something else? I
just wanted to, again, acknowledge great work on the part of Jake and John and all of this, but Jake in particular. I think there's a potential revenue source for TriMet as we sort of lend him out to conferences around the country as he's invited to demonstrate, frankly, the great work that TriMet does in this area. And I guess just to note that the FTA does use our program as one of the models. So we have a great, obviously, as you well know, a great relationship with the Federal Transit Administration. But frankly excellent work in areas like this, I think just help us continue that excellent reputation with them. But in addition to that, I think really adds real value to the deliberations that we have on these important topics. So again, thanks to the team for their work.
Yes.
Did the FTA review the contracting documents and the orange line, how all the construction and participation, et cetera, from a Title VI, if they, I'm not sure how they
Right.
intersect, but
Yeah. So
there's got to be an intersection someplace.
Right. So anytime we do any sort of project like that, we have to undertake a Title VI analysis, and that's
Okay.
part of their review, both
Okay.
project-wide, but I think after the fact as well. And related to that, we submitted our updated DBE program. That effort was led by Monica Johnson, and we're awaiting, just like this, concurrence on sort of their approval of that program update as well.
Good. Okay. Can you make sure the board knows?
Yes.
Please. Sure, I know at least. Board knows. Thanks.
And in sort of in line with the audit day here, I would note that FTA also does something called a triennial review, where all of these programs are reviewed, our compliance with those programs are reviewed. The fact that one part of the federal government approves something doesn't always mean the other part of the federal government knows that. So those triennial reviews try to tie all this together. So in addition, there are other special reviews that FTA does associated with capital projects. So I can assure you, they are very involved in all of these efforts every step of the way.
Okay.
All right. Any more comments or questions? All right then, is the board ready to offer a motion to approve resolution 16-09-60?
So moved.
Mr. President.
Do I have a motion? Does I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Again, good work.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, very good work.
So all those then in favor of the motion to approve resolution 16-09-60, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, motion is approved unanimously. So that's the end of our business meeting agenda. Does the board or staff know of anything else that needs to come before the board today? All right, with that, I'm going to adjourn our business meeting. We do have a briefing agenda coming up here. We're running a little earlier than I thought we would. So how about we take a 5-minute break and come back? Is 5 minutes enough? All right.
7's okay.
7-minute break. All right, good. And I'll beat you to the restroom.
Yeah. Yeah, good to see you.
Been a while.
Yeah, where you been?
practical, convenient, and more efficient.
Not taking too long on any of them, but I wanted doesn't report to one area. So having bus operators have restrooms available to them is incredibly important, but also incredibly challenging for us over the region. So Dan, as you well know, has shared a multi-divisional, very participatory group where we prioritize the needs and work through those. And Steve's team has been busy implementing some of those improvements. So turn it over to you, Dan, perhaps first.
Great, thank you. I am here just to provide an update. I was here a year ago, and we talked about restrooms, and I wanted to bring you up to speed on some of the new work we're working on and a follow-up on some of the projects that we've already been working on for a while. I promised Neil I would keep this short, and I will. I would compare it to maybe the length of a restroom break, which we just took. So I'll keep the jokes to a minimum, I promise. So, and Steve will join me on the implementation end, which I do greatly appreciate. So as I shared last year, our team is pretty diverse. I will note that we have 3 operators on our committee, one from each garage, which has been invaluable. And a key omission from this list, and I apologize, is our employee communications team, which is taking on an increasingly important role in our duties. And I'll explain that in a little more detail in a minute. This overview pretty much represents our charge as a committee, and it's an overview of the things I just want to touch on today. So needs analysis being primarily my responsibility. We'll talk about some of the projects that are now hitting the street. And a new charge that we've taken on is the increasing the awareness of our team among our frontline employees. We're surprised to learn how many operators don't know that we exist or how they can submit a complaint or a concern about a restroom. There is a formal system in place where we can track complaints and get back to operators. And making sure that those operators are aware that they have a representative within their garage, not just garage management, but a fellow employee that they can talk to who can take their issues back to our committee. So quickly, the needs analysis, not a drastic change from last year. We continue to work on the list of establishing priorities. This helps inform our capital budget planning for the coming fiscal year. I also work with the project development team on assessing scaling the needs of our investments. And what I mean by that is we would want to make sure that we're spending the right amount of money at a facility. For instance, we would not want to build the Taj Mahal at a facility that's used 5 or 10 times a day. So scaling the investment to the need is something that we still focus on. And one thing I want to add, this is new this year in the needs analysis, is time in the seat. I know we hear at many of these meetings in the open testimony period where operators will come up and tell you that they are having a difficult time making one complete trip on their route without having to use a restroom. And I've actually taken an initial look. We have 20% of our bus routes require their operators are in the seat for over an hour and a half before they get to the end of the line. So one thing that we're taking on this year is evaluating mid-route facilities. And so here's just a brief kind of a snapshot of what this analysis looks like. The line 4, not a surprise to many people who ride the bus. That can require being in the seat for over 2 hours, and that's in free-flowing traffic. So if you run into traffic, you can be pushing up to 2.5 hours. Anyway, so we're taking that on this year, and that's definitely the kind of information we want to get out to operators. So I'm going to jump into the implementation projects here, and this is where I have a number of slides, mostly photos, and that's why Steve's here. One project I'm rather proud of that will come online next month is at the end of the Line 17 in Northeast Portland. This is an old layover location in a neighborhood. It's a public housing complex where we've been for decades, and this was ranked very high on our list of locations that operators did not like, and the primary reason was they had to walk a very far distance to access the restroom. So I met with Home Forward, formerly the Housing Authority, last spring, and we found that we mutually had many dislikes about this facility. So we're actually opening a new facility next month. It's going to be located in this building, so you obviously see the proximity to the layover. And right when you walk inside the door, it's going to be rekeyed for our operators, and there'll be a restroom. So this is, you can still see the paint bucket and whatnot. So that should be complete next month. So we're very proud of that, and I've been out there a number of times and spreading the word with Line 17 operators, and they're thrilled. So another location we receive a lot of complaints is up at Pier Park in St. John's. And primary problems here are isolation, especially late at night. So we are partnering with the Parks Bureau. This is the restroom facility. It's a public side and the private side where we have a key. It's very isolated, poor lighting, so we're partnering with the Parks Bureau. Here's this close-up. You can sort of see the bus off to the left, the yellow lights. That's the bus laying over. But here we're simply, we're finishing the scope of the Parks Bureau, and I hope to get this done this fiscal year 17, where we're going to add a new light, camera. Actually, I wish I had a pointer. I don't know if this has a laser. It may, but a fence that will extend along the back side of the building so that no one could be standing behind the building waiting for you to come out. That's not uncommon at this facility, where people will hang out and wait for the operator to come out and then ask if they can go in. So here is the last, and this is where I wanted Steve's help for a minute, and that is talking about a facility that's been on our list for a few years now, and it's located at the east terminus of the Line 19. And I don't know, Steve, if you can see the photos.
No, this was one that seemed like a relatively simple project that turned out to be a little more complicated than we thought. As you notice, to the left of the slides is designated open space. So it's a piece of space adjacent to the freeway that's designated to be an environmental zone. So that made the permitting a little bit more complex. So that one has taken a little bit longer to get permitted. We're looking at completing the permitting process with the City of Portland in November. We would get this out to bid at the first of the year and get this completed and online before the, probably before July 1st, right there in late June. And what this is it's a facility that allows for a temporary restroom, a porta potty, if you will, but provides the security and the lighting. And one of the things that was difficult to permit was that electrical connection and also a accessible pathway in the environmental zone, issues of stormwater and also light pollution. So we've been working with the city to sort of dial those improvements so that we can get an approval in that place. So again, what was thought to be a really relatively simple implementation was complicated a little bit just because of the location. And we weren't able to move it out of the environmental zone because that's where that bus stop and that layover position was for our routing. So be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, at any time, please feel free. I will add a benefit to this. Not only do people feel a little safer when they're in there, but this protects the unit when we're not using it, because what often happens out here is there's a lot of camping that occurs along the I-205 corridor, and people will vandalize, they'll rip the doors open. We've gotten to a point where we have to put chains around the portables, but people still find a way to actually pry the doors open. So this keeps the facility clean and safe when we're not using it. So this design in itself has been well received by operators.
We have a question here.
Yes.
Going back to that particular design, it seems to be an open design where you can look in through some type of fencing or grating.
Mm-hmm.
What protects our operators during inclement weather?
It is open from the sides, the roof and lighting, so they should stay relatively dry, but that's a great point. I think the idea here with what they call hog wire, which is the new trend in security fencing, is that it just provides a visual buffer. There are no blind spots.
So the only thing that will be able to be at that particular site will be, quote unquote, the porta potty type facility?
Right. Due to the environmental zone, actually hard piping and building a permanent facility would not be allowed.
I apologize. Yeah, and we've made an effort to, and we have eliminated many portables out in the field. We don't like them. We like to consider them all temporary. Some have been in place for a long time, but we've removed at least a half a dozen since our committee was created, and always created a safer and better alternative. So, but in this case, Steve's right also that portable, unfortunately, is our only option unless we change the end of the route. So, I'm sorry if I didn't get that in your original question. And just to their early design phase right now, Oregon City Transit Center operators complained if you can just stare down the middle of the building there, our break room is on the right, the left is the concierge, and that isn't really an area that customers necessarily need to be. It gets dark, we call it a breezeway, so we're going to put in some attractive fencing and some lighting to make operators feel a little more safe when they exit. And also at Hollywood Transit Center, and Steve can talk a little bit about this, but also the case where there's a portable where we think we can do better, and it sounds like we have a concept.
Yes, this is one where we'd like to have a full plumbed facility, fully enclosed from the climate and that sort. We are in the very early stages of this. This was a project that came to us 1st of July. And so we've engaged the city in early consultation conversations about what the planning and zoning requirements are. I think everybody knows a very busy facility here, and so we want to make sure we don't kind of fall into maybe the pitfalls we did at Flavel with making some assumptions with the permitting process. So, but we do plan to get this designed in the fiscal 17 cycle and constructed very early in fiscal 18. So maybe by the end of the calendar year 17.
Where are you looking at putting it in this? Okay. So
that's exactly the conversation we're having in the city.
Yeah, and this again is 2 long crosstown routes, being a long time in the seat. So this will provide them a nice place to get out of the bus for a minute if they need to, in the middle of an hour-and-a-half run to use the restroom.
Yeah.
And so I touched on this, and lastly, the new charge of our committee is to really reach out to operators. And one way I'm planning to do that is present to the training supervisor their staff meeting in October to make sure that they're aware of how we work, that we exist. We really want to get out to the garages, so Sean Floss and myself and employee communications will visit. We'll visit every garage at least 3 times a year, where we'll actually sit around. We've already done it at Powell, and it went very well. Have a map out, and we just take questions. We can put an end to some rumors. We can start some new ones that are really good. So, but it just having that face, name, connection, I think that's one of the frustrations we hear from operators frequently, is they just feel like we don't listen and that we aren't even there. We can't always do what they want, but at least we can get them an answer. And lastly, flat screens in the garage where we can promote use of the operator gateway system, which is where they can actually submit restroom concerns that get tracked in a database. We can get back to them with answers. So lastly, as Dio probably already mentioned, we're a continuous improvement team. So here is basically where we are. We're going to continue assessing needs. We're going to remove portables wherever we can, hopefully at Hollywood next. If I didn't mention already, the home forward at the line 17, it's forming new partnerships and re-engaging our existing partners, because we found in that case, they weren't thrilled about the bathroom either. So we found a mutual solution, so everybody won. And the operator engagement. So I think this last slide is essentially everything I've already talked about. So with that, I'll take questions. I didn't time it, but hopefully that was short enough. Are there
I
any?
didn't see you getting any dirty looks.
No dirty looks. Nobody's fidgeting. Sure.
You okay?
Well, actually, I apologize. I have to head out, so I'll just I'll just make a couple comments. Great presentation, appreciated. Don't mind taking a little bit longer because this is a very important item for our operators and us as leadership and board members. What I will say is that it has been a while since we had an update. And I think this is a critical issue that we sometimes as board members get feedback from and on. So I would recommend we probably revisit this a little more often than annually. I think we had somewhat of an update not too long ago, but I think the official update was about a year ago. Yeah. But I think this is something that we've heard, similar to what you were just referencing. Sometimes during the open comments, we get comments about this. I wouldn't say regularly, but fairly often. And it's something that I think, as myself as a board member, I would like to stay more informed about some of the progress, some of the potential things that we're hearing, potentially complaints and things like that, to make sure that we're more informed and really being more proactive about addressing this. And you said it already that we've already cleared out about a half dozen
about a half dozen of the porta potty situations,
Mhm.
which really aren't ideal, and putting in more permanent solutions. So that's really what we like to hear. So greatly appreciate it. I just recommend we revisit it if the board is open to that, maybe biannually or twice a year, just to keep informed about the progress that's going on here.
Yeah, be happy to.
I apologize, but
Thanks
I
a
do
lot.
have to
No
depart.
problem.
Dr. Bethel? No, Director Asman, you had a question?
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know if you can answer the question, but maybe Doug, you're both here. When you're planning for new routes, is this a consideration?
Yes.
Okay, I just don't know. I'm going to guess, I mean, even more so now, I mean, yeah, just trying to find being so proactive about this is great.
And that's
We
directly,
appreciate it.
that is essentially my job as a bus service planner. And so,
Okay,
yes,
I
it's
don't-
near the
yeah.
top of the list. No, absolutely. It's easily overlooked, but it is
And
one
then
of the
we
first
also
things.
looking at the future too, so we don't, 5 years from now, we're gonna have another bus there or something, if you can project, so. The size of the facility, that's,
And that's the question I'm entertaining right now from
Okay.
Steve's staff is, do we need 2 stalls at Hollywood as the city grows and fills in? And I didn't mean to surprise you with that. But that's a good question, growth.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. Very informative. Good work.
Next
Mr.
up.
Manager, yes.
Is an update for you on the HOP Fastpass. And as Chris Tucker and J.C. Vanetta come up, recognize that we are coming in for a landing on the technical side of the HOP Pass program, but we're ramping up very quickly the communications and outreach program associated with actually putting the PASS program in shape. And I would just note to you that even this technologically challenged older guy here is now using this PASS. This is the first test we've been having for the last couple of weeks, a couple hundred of us, and Chris will go through that. And it's very encouraging to see the progress so far. So with that, I turn it over to Chris, and then we'll also hear from JC.
All right. President Warner, members of the board, good morning. We'll go through the agenda here quickly. We'll go through a project status. I'll update you on how the lab testing has gone, as well as the 3-month look ahead, the employee test, and then we'll pass it over to JC for the internal communication and marketing. And I turned it off, which is great. There we go. So from a project status perspective, we've actually got a couple of videos, and it sounds like they will work, which is great. And essentially, this is what we're using to communicate internally to all agency employees. And we'll make tweaks to the video, and then the intent is to roll these out to the public next year for their ability to learn how the system works. So we'll play one here to start with, hopefully, and you'll get a sense for what we're doing on these short little bits of information. And as this one loads, it is essentially what is HOP Fastpass. And it was filmed by JC staff, and we'll see if it loads. And we're not going to blame Google. It's not their fault.
The future of paying transit fares is about to change in the Portland metro area. Next year, we're launching our new electronic fare system called HOP Fastpass that's designed to make riding the bus or train faster and easier for both our riders and operators. This new fare payment system is for the entire region that includes TriMet buses, Max Light Rail, and West Commuter Rail, in addition to C-Tran buses and Portland Streetcar. What is HOP Fastpass? Essentially, it's an account-based payment system that allows people to quickly pay their fare by tapping a contactless payment device, such as a transit smart card, contactless bank card, or smartphone at an electronic reader. Every C-Tran and TriMet bus will have an electronic reader located next to the fare box. There will also be 4 readers installed inside every streetcar, 2 in the middle and 1 on each end, and at least 2 readers at every Max and West Rail platform. To pay a fare on a bus or streetcar, a person simply taps their payment card or device on the reader every time they board. For Max or West, a rider just taps on the HOP Fastpass reader on the platform before they board. There's no need to tap off at the end of the ride. This is not new technology. Other cities, such as Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, are using electronic fare systems. However, we've tried to take their best traits and combine them into one great system. Unlike other cities with electronic fares, Hop Fastpass is account-based, where all the user's information is securely stored in the back-end system, not actually on the card. It will also provide pay-as-you-go benefits for our riders, also known as fare capping. We'll explain more in a video called Benefits for Riders.
So that's an example of a short video. We can play one more. There's a total of 6 now of internal videos that we're going to start circulating. If she can pull the other one up, great. And this is why are we doing this? And while that's loading, I would just mention that card readers are now installed at all locations. Streetcars are the only ones still left to get those installed. We've got one prototype done, and those will all be complete by the end of October. This includes all C-Tran vehicles as well that are completed. And while that's loading, I would just note that the integration of the core systems is nearly complete. So all of those third-party apps and websites, retail network has been integrated into the back-end system for the Hop Fastpass. Neil noted that we've done about 200 plus employees have been testing the system this month. It's been great feedback. Folks who absolutely knew nothing about the system. I'll cover a little more of that in a minute. So an example would be frontline operators, field staff using the system, kind of all ages and experience level. And we will continue to iterate on the website as well as the mobile app. And you know what? We can just skip it. It's okay. You'll have an opportunity to see all of these videos at your leisure. So she goes back to the slide. Some of the key feedback we received from employees was that the website needs to be more intuitive. So yeah, you can functionally register and you can make a payment, do all of those things, but it needs to be more intuitive. Make it so it's more clear which click I do first. And this was the website developer's first cut at it, literally just to get the pipes working and not as much focus on the interface. And now that kind of design work will move forward over the next several months. But it was great to hear that from the employees. Also, even what what you tap on the reader itself, what it displays could be, the expiration time could be bigger, for example, and more of a priority on the screen. So all good feedback that we keep capturing here. So an integrated lab test, that's a photo of the actual lab. So it's really a whole bunch of equipment that's integrated into the central system via the network. We were 95% of tests were passed, which is great. And we were able to successfully load via the retail network, the mobile app, the consumer website, the call center system, the 800 number, and the TriMet point of sale system. More development will continue, such as reports that will be needed to operate the system. And employee testing, as we mentioned, we actually started with just 30 in August to work out the kinks of how to provide feedback, and then we went to 200 plus in September. This included all 3 agencies using the system, and we're already making some changes. Simple things, such as the back of the card has a scratch off like a lottery ticket. We had a user scratch it off, including the number. So things, and some people didn't know if they scratch or peel. So we've already found a suitable replacement for that. But those little things add up, and they're really important. For the next 3 months, we are focused on scripted testing in the field. So the project team will go out and really nail those really complex, unusual use cases. Maybe it's a C-Tran express ride that transfers to a light rail station that then takes a streetcar or another bus, and we want to make sure everything is perfectly calculates the fares. And again, we will continue to iterate on the websites and mobile apps. We're also going to have an opportunity to go out into the field to a grocery store such as 7-Eleven, literally take our card, load it at their cash register with fake money, see it load through to the back end. Right now we've done it all in the lab environment, but now we get to go out to the stores and start testing. I'm also pleased to announce that Plaid Pantry has signed an agreement, so they are on track,
Right.
and they are now under the design development phase, so all Plaid Pantry stores in the region will be part of the Hop Fastpass system. Agency training and internal and external communication begins, and JC will touch on that in a moment. And beta testing, so this is where we get real live money and real live use. So we're going to start with all employees testing the system late January, and then we ramp it up to actual consumers testing it. So we'll start with a few hundred and then ramp that up to get their feedback to make sure everything is really intuitive and easy to use and working out every bug that we can possibly find. And then we will roll out to institutions. So we'll have a handful of institutions, employers, schools to help us test the system as well. And the last thing I'll mention is that the rollout strategy, there's really 3 key options. One was do an all-in and turn it on and see what happens. And I talked to you about that years ago, and that wasn't desirable. We're not going to do that. But we're going to do, instead of a real long rollout, we're going to do short bursts. So turn it on, several hundred people, make sure it works, make some improvements, add more more employee or more customers and more institutions in short bursts to get up to our launch middle of next year. So I think I'll pause there and see if you have any questions for me before I turn it over to JC.
Keep moving.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, wait.
When you, even on the first rollout with the public, you're going to have people at the kiosk?
Do you mean at the platforms, for
Yeah.
example? Yeah, and I'll defer to JC on that, and that's kind of the entire external communication plan and field staff being out there and helping customers. Our on-street customer service would be ideal, and one of the things they thrive on is that type of on-platform support.
Yeah, I noticed over the years how having us out there is really great, whatever the situation is. You know,
Yes, and
it's,
we will.
I think it's worth all the effort to do that.
Absolutely.
And then when you get to this, I would be your beta or omega, as a volunteer.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that one of our tasks is to make sure that we don't have to have someone there. So the communication is very clear. The directions are crisp and clear, so that we don't necessarily have to have that person there. But we will definitely look at it because it's very important.
Thank you.
So I wanted to walk through the marketing and outreach plan for this project. As you can imagine, it's quite lengthy. It resides in a 3-ring binder. I didn't bring one for you today, but we'll go over very quickly the next 10 slides of how we plan on rolling it out. As you can imagine, this is probably the largest educational campaign our agency will have ever put out there because we touch everyone that uses our system. So as we look through the marketing timeline, obviously we're following on our project as the project progresses. From now through December, it's really a light touch. It's answering people's questions. It's talking about it just very lightly as we start to see testing that's out on the system. In January, when the beta starts up in mid-January, that's when we really start to talk more about the system, educate folks and awareness. Now remember, the pool is very, very small, so it won't be very broad, but we are getting information into the hands of the folks who are using the system and also answering a lot of questions. Mid-May to July, we get to start having some fun because as we see the system coming online, we see more people using it, we can start to tease to the rest of the population that this system is actually going to be turned on, hopefully in July when all the cards are now in the stores and people will have access to the system. And after July and forward, it's full, the entire campaign is launched. We're talking to a number of people, and I'll go through some of the tactics that we have at hand, but it really is engaging folks around how to use the system and then the many benefits, which I want to talk about now. And you heard in the video some of the benefits, and I won't go into details, but a lot of them are that stored value and that loss protection. The value is stored on the back end, not the card. So if you lose the card, we can replace it very quickly and easily. Another key aspect of it is that the retail outlet. Currently at Fred Meyer's and Safeways, we have about 133 outlets. After the expansion, after the program is launched, we'll have 500 plus places where our riders can access tickets and buy transit passes. So it's a huge win for them. And so that's definitely one of the benefits that we want to key in on. And you also heard in the video too, a huge aspect that we think will benefit our riders is that pay-as-you-go. So if you purchase 2 fares during the day, you've already paid for a day pass and all your rides for that day are free. Similarly, if you pay up to the amount of a monthly pass during that calendar month, all of your rides after that are free. So you don't have to upfront the cost of a day pass because I don't know how many rides I'll take. Same way for a monthly pass, you're like, that's a lot of money to front at the beginning of a month. Now people can pay as you go and still get the benefits should they reach that level.
Question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My question is going to be on the youth pass. Is that going to be issued to PPS students, or that's to anyone who buy? I'm really trying to figure out how the students are going to access this come next year. Will it be through that, or it's going to be a different mechanism used for them?
Yeah, I can take that question. So Portland Public Schools is actually interested in leveraging their student ID, and they'll have the actual transit chip inside. So we've actually issued for Benson High School. All of their student IDs now actually have the transit chip. They're the very first actual school. They're going to be our pilot school.
Cool.
So they're actually going to have their student ID printed on this white card, but inside is the transit chip. They'll get their 9-month pass loaded to the card, and then they'll be able to go out, tap, and ride the system. Assuming that pilot goes well, then all those Portland Public Schools would have that. So as they take their photo for the student ID and then they print it, they will print the student ID on this hop card and they'll be able to tap and ride. That's the intent for the Portland Public Schools programs. Those outside of that, they will get that youth card right there. It's a non-personalized card, and then you just have the 9-month pass loaded on that, and then they can tap and use that to ride.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Did you have a question? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So when we look at phase one, we have, this is the creative that you're looking at. We still have tweaks to do, but it's our stick figure that has been a part of our campaign so far as we've launched it. Very graphical, very colorful. As we start to map out, again, how to use the system, tap on, and then as well as the many different benefits. So this is the first phase when you, in mid-January, when we start to see the pilot project come on board. This is the kind of advertising and the graphical look that you'll see. We then move into phase two. I kind of told you about the teaser campaign, and this is when we get to have fun because we start introducing these spokes blobs, which we call the hopsters, and we get to add a little bit of fun to the brand of Hop Fastpass as well as a little character. And we are looking for these guys to help explain how to use it. It brings a little bit more fun, very welcoming and inviting brand that we want to convey to the public, as well as to benefit the overall user experience. So that's the phase two, and this is when as we start to tease. And then when we look at the phase three launch, obviously we are doing more than just educating. We're really selling the entire system on its ease of use and the many benefits, especially that fare capping that we just explained. And as we continue to put to get more people to come onto the HOP system and use the card, we want to look at a number of different interactive activities. And you see 3 on your screen. We haven't necessarily vetted them, but it gives you the idea of the ways that we want to interact with folks and that we want to talk about the new system. When we look at our target audiences, this list is quite long because it's everyone who touches our system. And this is just kind of a quick little breakdown of all of them. But it really is, we're going after every community organization because we know we need to talk to them about the HOP system and how it works and how their folks use it as well. Our own employees, underserved populations, our employer program, which I'll talk about in a second, business and community leaders, it runs the gamut. We are truly going to be touching everyone. And when I said about our employer programs, so this is just a quick little list of a pilot that we will be bringing on board next year. So a lot of our focus is on the consumer side of it, just our regular rider who uses the system. We also have people who are on our employer programs like OHSU, PSU, who have thousands of employees, all the way down to small mom and pops that might have 3. And so these employer programs will be using an institutional website as they manage the cards of their employees. So we'll be testing that out in a pilot, and here's a quick list of those folks who will be bringing on board to try it out. And it really is going to also test, like, do we have enough training materials? Are we saying the right messaging for these folks? So during this pilot program, we'll be really evaluating it, because then once we take it from there, we have to then transition some 600 employers over to the new HOP Fastpass system, and we expect it to take us about 1.5 years because there are so many people that will be transitioning. When I said we're going to be touching everyone, we truly are, because we know that one-on-one contact with folks, it gives us that entree to talk about the system and the benefits. So we plan on doing a lot of outreach. We have brought on board some contractors to help us do some culturally sensitive outreach. We know there are many diverse communities within the Portland region, and we want to go to every one of them to talk about this new system. There's a list of just kind of activities that we're looking at. And we actually even have an activation truck, this hop truck that we're designing and putting into place where we can go out to various activities throughout the region, whether it's a farmer's market, the food basket distribution, ride connection events, or us going to some 200 plus events in Vancouver and the Portland metro region to talk about Hop Fastpass. And one of the key aspects of it, especially with the activation space, is to get them in to talk about the benefits, to get them to register their card, because it's going to be very important for us so they have that loss protection activated. And another good thing that we want to do is also have ticket exchanges where people can come out, take their tickets, exchange them for a value that we place on a hop card, and send them on their way and get them to start using the system right away. One of the last aspects of this is the retail experience. And I said to you how now we will have these cards in some 500 plus retail stores. And so what we want to do is make this experience the best for our riders as they go and purchase this. So with it, so it's going to look something similar like this at Safeway or Trader Joe's. We have designed packaging that we think stands out among all of the others, the Amazon.coms, the iTunes. We're going to be working with the Fred Meyer, Safeways of the world to develop door clings that are on the exterior of the buildings to show that TriMet's Hot Fast Pass is sold there. As well as developing signage for the customer service desks, as well as talking points, so they know how to adequately talk about this new product that they're selling. Our TVMs will be getting a facelift to conform with the Hot Fast Pass brand. And then we're also working with our folks at the TriMet ticket office to improve the overall customer experience at the TriMet ticket office, so that as people are queuing to be seen by one of our representatives, are there ways that we can help answer questions along the way in the little queuing line, or are there other ways that we can help them understand all of the aspects of the system? Now, outside of the formal training for TriMet employees, there's formal training underway for folks. We will be using all of our channels that are at our fingertips to help communicate how the entire system works and how they fit into the bigger picture, whether it's FAQs. Chris talked about how-to videos. We have a number of them. We are looking at a potential family day at the end of January. We'll invite you. But this is a great aspect for us to talk to them all about HOP, what it means, their role, as well as introduce dual chip cards. So every TriMet employee has a badge that accesses with a chip that accesses our TriMet facilities. The new cards will also have a chip that accesses the transit system. So we will be issuing them new cards as well. And all of it will be given with an employee kit that we hope to help them understand the much bigger picture that is Hop Fastpass. And if you have any questions, I would encourage you to go see myhopcard.com. It's our webpage that we have up right now that really addresses a lot of the key benefits and aspects of the system.
Cool.
I have just a quick question. In the retail setting, are the cards going to be in with the rest of the gift cards?
They will.
Oh, I see. Okay. Is there one vendor who assembles those cards?
Yes.
Those card stands?
Yeah, so we have one vendor that manufactures the actual cards and the packaging. And then we have 3 different retail networks that distribute those cards to the various stores.
I see.
You know, I didn't want to get into the dialogue this morning with the last speaker. Were you here when we were talking about the low-income fare? The Opal person talked about the failed implementation of the e-fare, and I was wondering, what the devil is he talking about? Do you have any idea what he's referring to there, since it hasn't been implemented yet?
I don't. We've actually heard a lot of rumors, and that's actually what we're doing from now until December, is really putting out a lot of rumors, whether it's in social media. So we've heard a lot of those. I have to say, I don't understand where a lot of it's coming from. I think there is some misinformation out there, and we're working very quickly to help clean it up.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay. Anything else from you, Mr. General Manager?
Mr. Board President, no. I've been able to sneak in all my comments along the way. So.
Good job. Good job.
Joe.
Oh. No, you guys are good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But we're not, is what you're saying.
I just wonder, I'm not sure how this goes down or procedures, but going back to the shutdown or track replacement, I had an opportunity as a retiree to wander around and just bird dog, look at how it was going. And I've done a couple of those, not with rail, but when you shut down a pulp mill for 72 hours, you got to get it up. So round the clock stuff. I just want the board to send a letter or something to everybody involved from the top on down, thanking them for an excellent job. And if I had, in the private sector, you can do other things, but I guess
Yeah.
we can't do things here.
On behalf of the board, is what
On
you're
behalf of the board.
Yes, okay.
So,
Consider it done, right, Mr. General?
Absolutely.
All right,
Right.
good. Yeah, I would comment, I forgot the first day of the closure. I wandered out.
See?
And so I learned about how it went and how the system went. And on my return trip, it was really quite amazing that what the customer service folks have done and helping folks. So it was good. So great job.
there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, oh yeah.
There's a lot of pressure.
And I was just blown away by
And
how calm and cool our customers were too.
yeah.
They were quite understanding. So congratulations on that.
And again, I think great communication program by JC and his staff, as well as our operations
Yeah,
team.
everybody
involved, and so it's, that is an appreciated sentiment, and we'll make sure we pass it on. Good.
Okay. And
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Again, I
Good, yeah,
want
very
something
good.
from the board,
Yep,
signed off
yep.
by the board.
Yep, good.
Yeah,
So.
good idea.
Great. All right, I think we're done today.
Hey,
Very good. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, motion to adjourn?
We already adjourned the meeting, so,
Oh, Christ.
you know.